So vain. But I guess that's half the fun, right? What can you do? Alright. I'm going to upgrade to the big stuff here. Since we are about to be moderating a serious big time debate. Gonna get that energy level up, you know. Okay. So tonight should be fun. Counterboy BP, you are here just in time. Yeah, we're going to be doing a debate, but this one's a little different. Instead of me debating, we are going to be moderating a debate between two other people. And that's going to be a, who knows? Maybe this will be the beginning of a beautiful new direction for the channel. Should be fun. Tonight's debate subject is engaging and perhaps a little insane. It's the question of whether we should engage in a first strike, if the world wasn't spooky enough. A first strike against North Korea using nuclear weapons. So it should be interesting. I think that'll be something. Of course, Kevin Castley, big on Twitter. Not so much on Twitch, but big on Twitter. That'll be interesting to hear from him about. He is, of course, pro-nuclear first strike. Dylan, anti-nuclear first strike. Nina's Mouse, it is such a treat to have you here tonight. I hope you're doing well. Welcome, everybody. Now, just to be clear, I don't want anybody to be too cavalier, too casual about the subject of using nuclear weapons. Again, that's the kind of language that can go from, I guess, military to genocidal very quickly. So please be careful with that. But that should be a nice distraction from the nuclear level meltdown that we are seeing from our incumbent administration here in the United States of America. Leslie, it's good to see you here. I saw you're taking a break, and hey, if you're taking a break, that's all well and good. Whatever works best for you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, Leslie HD 4K is the star of our adults-only channel on our Discord. Our Discord, which is, of course, limited to people who are 18 and up now. Anyway, Leslie is certainly the person who's got the channel going. It's a lot of fun. If you're 18 or older and you confirm your age, you can check it out too. Here's a link to our Discord, by the way. So be sure to check that out if you're so inclined. But you got to be 18 or older to join the Discord, and you have to confirm your age to get into the pervert channel. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, it is great to have you here. It's such a delight to have you here. Bassett, can you link the children's only? There is no children's only channel. There are no children allowed in the Discord, except for the couple of people who were grandfathered in after we made the rule that you've got to be 18 and up. So, anywho, go to Destiny's Discord. Why? What's going on? And just to be clear, there are no disputes in our channel as to whether adult content should be categorized a certain way. It's all in the same channel. All right, let's see here. Back to the main subject here. Main subject: nuclear strike against North Korea. It's going to be an interesting debate tonight. I have no doubt. Looking forward to that. So maybe we can watch a quick video about the subject or something. You know, maybe get some background here. Perplexed Blackout joins us and says, "I like Kim." Perplexed Blackout, a real breakout star in our Discord community recently. Perplexed Blackout said today that he would take a bullet for President Trump. A bullet for President Trump. Incredible stuff. A real commitment, clearly, to making America great again. Perplexed Blackout, if you'd like to call in real quick and talk about that, you're more than welcome to. No pressure. We didn't schedule this, but if you'd like to, you're more than welcome to. HLab says, a bullet where? Good question. We haven't discussed that yet. Kazakh 5000 says, why would you nuke North Korea? It's already a third world country. Well, Kazakh, save that question for our debate guest in 24 minutes. Kevin Castley. That should be very interesting. Roman Taco says, all right, guys, after talking about a serious adult server, let's start talking about nuking North Korea. Now, hey, fair enough. Tony Hawkins, says there's a pro-Trump prayer vigil happening on YouTube right now. Most embarrassing I've ever seen. Could you send us a link, Tony Hawkins? By the way, love your work with the skater boards. Very based and cool. Zerika Jinx says Destiny makes fun of your hair. Did he? What did Destiny have to say about my hair? What do you have to say about my hair? Man, I tell you, if that guy has something to say about my hair, whew, yeah, you better clip it, buddy. Alright, in the meantime, yeah, you're not going to be talking about my hair, alright? In the meantime, he said it makes you look younger. Ooh, well, that sounds good. Thank you. Okay. Alright. And hey, thank you for subscribing, Tony Hawkins. I really do appreciate that. It is good to have you here. See, the communist is going to debate voter fraud. I'm not, and I'm not doing that tonight. Although I think we might need to investigate all this voting fraud stuff because people keep asking me about it. I guess it's that part where I'm a lawyer, right? I followed Bossy after I called him a cam girl and he sent me a heart. Well, Fifth Mercenary, hey, it's a compliment in its own way. Counterboy BP, thank you for the 100 bits. Started watching around the time you did that roundtable style debate with Hassan. Loved your content ever since. Keep it up. Thank you, Counterboy. Gosh, I really appreciate the kind words. That's very kind of you to say. On voice chat with pals discussing your hair. Well, hey, thank you so much. Glad to hear that you've got something to discuss. Yeah, actually, the Raj show that we last debated Hassan on, I don't know if Raj is, the Austin show, I don't know if Austin is doing the shows anymore. I think he maybe has transitioned to other content. I don't know. Cubes Game says, honestly never watched this channel before, LMAO, but we're talking about your hair. Hey, it's a subject we talk about here now and then. So hey, we have a good time, Cubes Games. It's good to have you. Clearly you must be a fan of the time cube theory. If so, it's a treat to have you. Tall Toast Raven says, Bassett, we should nuke your mama's house. I don't think that would be very appropriate. You know, there are a lot of innocent people that live around her. Shinzo says, we should nuke North Korea. Expecting that we should nuke Canada. That would give us the element of surprise. Well, that may be true, but of course, Canada never did anything to us. I don't think we should, just go cavalier dropping atomic bombs. But I will say that our guest, debate guest tonight, Kevin Castley, may disagree. So we'll see. But I think he's got a, go into tonight's debate with an open mind. I think it's a subject that is a little extreme. But we'll see what he has to say. All right. Geek with Glasses joins us. Geek with Glasses says we should nuke Florida. Well, my friend, no, we shouldn't nuke Florida. But I'll tell you, if you want to nuke Florida, hey, we still be in better shape than wherever you're at, my friend. Kevin Castley is cringe, says Jim Cram 97. Well, hold on a minute. If he was cringe, why would he be debating Dylan and having me moderate it, huh? All right. He's wearing a toupee. I don't think so. We should nuke my inability to get a GF. Well, my friend, Jimmery Rustler 8888, if you're having trouble getting a girlfriend, consider playing Minecraft. I've heard that it's a great place to meet women. Zudane says, could Trump have done anything better to hold on? Well, Zudane, I suppose he could have tried to act presidential, competent, at least once. He probably would have swayed a couple of percent, if he just tried, right? But I don't know. At the end of the day, who can say? He thinks it's not over yet, so... Bazzi, meeting underage children online? What are you talking about? I don't even play Minecraft. But I've heard that that's a great place to meet a Minecraft GF, Let's see here. Jimmy Rustler says Destiny plays Minecraft and he slays, so maybe you're right. There you go. That's the way to go. Play Minecraft. Elio says, I believe that's a scientifically proven tactic. Ooh, that's good to hear. Ooh, wow. Fidelity, we've been up for 8 minutes. So, Bazzi, do you think Jill Biden is a GILF? Well, what is a GILF? I don't know what that is. Gotham says the average age of a Minecraft player is 12. Bazzi, why don't you find a girlfriend there? No, never mind. I didn't know that. All right, I thought Minecraft was a game that 30-year-olds played because The only person I ever see playing it is Destiny. And then the people in my Discord server, like, Gundam. But hey, if that's true, then you should try meeting somebody on a game whose average age is 18 and up. All right? Chaminar, yes. That's a question I think you can answer in the affirmative. Megivoon says, Bassett, nuclear test zones in Nevada have a lot of biodiversity nowadays. Nuke North Korea for Mother Earth? Well, that's a new one. Haven't heard that argument before. But, hey, yeah, maybe you could give me a source. Escon says, do you respect Sam Cedar? I don't know. I don't watch Sam Cedar very much, but he's, from what I've seen, he's one of the more reasonable of the folks on the left. Okay. Do you think Biden will win Arizona? I guess, I think when it's all said and done, he will, but it's going to be close. It's going to be close. All right. DMZ is pretty diverse ecology these days. That's true. Although I suppose that's just because, like anywhere else in the world, we've minimized economic development. The environment, has a little more of a chance to breathe. Frosty Pajama says, "Nuke the moon, see what happens." I don't think we should nuke the moon. But that's just my opinion. There are both sides to an issue. Bossy, what's up with the Hitler haircut? Are you for serious, Dortmund Boy 09? I don't think Hitler could flip his hair like that. All right, and that's just ridiculous. Okay, that's just ridiculous, my friend. Did you hear about DN? I didn't. Who and what is DN? New Frog Dom. Tuck Twitch says, "Do you remember me, Bossy?" Of course I do. How could I remember, or rather, how could I forget a name like that? Do you think Trump will concede before inauguration? No, I don't think President Trump will ever directly concede. He may indirectly concede, but I don't think he'll ever directly concede that he lost a free and fair election. Let's see. Edrito says, "Hi, Bassett, long-time viewer, first-time donator. What are your thoughts on the Minecraft speed runs conducted by XQCLXQC question mark? I don't know who that is. And I didn't know you could speed run Minecraft. I thought all you do is you play and you build a house until you get bored. That's my experience with Minecraft. So I didn't know you could speed run that game. Maybe how do you speed run a game with no ending, right? It doesn't. I just thought you go out, you punch a tree, you make a what dragon? There's the zombie and the skellies, and you can ride the pig. Ender dragon. What is it? Okay. No, I don't know what game you're talking about. We're talking about Minecraft. Have you seen Gargalon? Who is Gargalon? Is this some kind of meme? You about to say Gargalon needs nuts? What are you talking about there? I don't even know who that is. Ken Griffey Jr. says, Bassett, can you say hello to my friend Stephen Kenneth Destiny Benelli II? Excuse me, Benell II. He's a big fan of yours and watching now. Well, Ken Griffey Jr., it's good to have you. I'm glad to hear that Mr. Benell has such famous fans, including you, Ken Griffey Jr. I mean, hell, you're a big time baseball player, I think. You hit the home runs and you get the strikes and you run the first base and all that. That's pretty cool. So hey, very cool to know that some pro athletes are watching Destiny. Did you see the Kenneth Copeland video? I did, and boy, was that some cope. That was indeed some cope. What are your thoughts on the... Okay, I think these gotta be memes here. What the hell is a Muffet defense? I don't know what that is. A Muffet defense? I gotta Google this here. A Muffet defense. I don't know what that is. I don't see anything on Google, so I'm guessing this is another trick. Okay. Have you seen Micro Dan's lecture on the importance of voting? Look, all I know is that another guy by the name of Dan didn't register to vote, and that's pretty crazy, given that he is old enough to know better. But hey, it is what it is, all right? Dortmund Boy 09 says, Bassy, random question. Do American states have their own anthems? Since all German states have their own anthems? American states have their own, I believe. They do have anthems. They're not really a big part of, culture. Some states like Texas, maybe Florida have more widely known anthems, but none of them are really, at the level that the national anthem is, I don't know what Texas's anthem is, but, they've got so many songs about Texas that, Florida has one, I think, called Way On Down the Suwannee River. So, yeah, states do have anthems, but it's kind of like how states have, official state flower, official state snack. It's kind of, nonsense. Brandon Spike says, how did Biden win with 676 million votes if there are only 20,000 Americans? My God. That's incredible. Holy moly. Wow. The other day I saw Destiny had like 18,000 people watching. I didn't know he was that famous. I mean, that's like, 9 out of 10 Americans watching this guy. Pretty incredible. Okay, Oopsie TV says, did you hear about one of the guys that testified for Giuliani as a registered sex offender? I did, and I'll say this. I don't think a man being a sex offender should taint him for his entire life, if he served his time and all that. That said, I also think if I were running a campaign for the presidency of the United States, I'd probably screen things out a little better since, of course, when you have a registered sex offender speaking on your behalf, the only thing anybody's going to say is, hey, did you hear about that registered sex offender that spoke on behalf of Rudy Giuliani? Man. Yeah, 40K. Incredible. Tico Melito says, Bastia, could you say hi to all my ferret friends in DGG? Absolutely. Ferrets are some real wonderful creatures, second only to squirrels. Pretty incredible stuff. So it's good to have you all here, furry ferret friends. Do you know who Mario Judah is? No, I don't. I really don't. What is your highest viewer count you ever got? Gosh, I think after a raid, I had like 4,000 one time. My highest organic viewer count, without anybody ever raiding or anything like that, was 12 or 1,300. So, I'm pretty small fry here, but, we have a good time all the same. Fluffenstein says, have you ever had any encounters with Nick Fuentes? I'd love to see that. Please let me know. I haven't. Maybe someday we will. But no, I haven't had any encounters with Nicolas Fuentes. And maybe one of these days we will. Breaking news from Geek with Glasses here. Alright, what is this breaking news, Geek? Wow, that is some pretty weak breaking news, and I'm never opening your links again. Okay. You think Biden makes it through all 4 years? Probably. I mean, he's going to have the best medical care in the world. So that's my guess, but maybe not. We ever talk to Kraut? Maybe. I follow him on the Twitter, so maybe one of these days. Ken Griffey Jr. says, is there a political topic you've changed your mind on in the past 2 years? Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. 2 years? Probably. I don't know, universal basic income, probably. I previously thought that was kind of a nonsense idea, but now I'm all for it. Now I am all for it. Boss, are you excited about tomorrow? What's tomorrow? What am I missing tomorrow? S-Con says, I saw you on Destiny the other day when you guys were watching TYT and you seemed really angry in your voice. Are you okay? Of course I'm okay. I was just angry at that communist lady ragging on Joe Biden like what? Right after the day that the guy wins the election? I mean, holy moly. Jeez Louise, give the guy some slack, Anyway, so it very much annoyed me. Very much frustrated me. All that just doomerism the day of the election. I mean, come on. Anyway. Alright. Racky Dude says, what do you think about the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan ending today? I'm glad that the fighting has come to an end, but, I'd have to know more to know whether or not I think it was a good end or a bad end, I guess, I don't really know which side I would favor. I don't know enough to have an opinion on that yet. But maybe now that our election is over, I can think about it a little more. That'd be good. Lastly, Turkey was supporting a big claim I don't know anything about. I'd have to look into. What is tomorrow? What am I supposed to be nervous about tomorrow? How's work, Basti? Defeat that class action oil spill lawsuit? That's so few. That was years back. Years back, my friend. Years back. Okay, I don't know what's tomorrow, and you guys are spooking me. When will you be joining Parler? Well, Barry Reed, I'll tell you this, my friend. I think I'll join Parler, when it fills out a little bit more. But for me, I'm still a Twitter fan. Twitter.com. Twitter.com. Give us a follow if you haven't already, my friends. We just passed 9,000 followers, which is, pretty big. Once we hit 10,000, well, then we are officially a micro-influencer. So it's a pretty big deal, all right? Be sure to check it out. Which news orgs are worth their subscriptions? The Economist. And beyond that, it's up to you. But I would definitely subscribe to The Economist, my favorite news magazine. Don't click Orcanito's link. It's a wiener. Well, thanks for that, Gotham. I appreciate it. Did you know there's no Uber in Kansas? No, but that's a real Uber shame. RJCA says, hopes for a new relationship with Iran. Fingers crossed. Peaceful coexistence, I think, would be better than a perpetual low-key war, right? Is there a valid argument that communism is anti-American? Well, Snake Root, I guess communism seems like to me it's fundamentally a threat to individual freedom, even when implemented in the most democratic sense. So I guess to me, I would view it as anti-American, but I'd have to a little more time to answer that more fully. Horror Existence says, I just want to say I love when you get all preachy about the Constitution, American values. Keep it going, buddy. Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Horror Existence. I'm glad to hear somebody appreciates that. Insane Jafafa, thank you for subscribing to Twitch Prime, my friend. It is good to have you here. Holy macaroni. Wow. Marion Wilkinson. That is quite a wiener. Looks like a friggin' lumpy Tootsie Roll. Okay. All right. Tenebrous Blacksmith, of course, like all men of taste and refinement, I am a Pepe poster. Okay? What are your thoughts on prosecuting Trump after he steps down? Look, Oopsie TV, if the state of New York can do it, they absolutely should. Frankly, they should, if Hunter Biden was, convicted of crime. Hunter Biden was convicted of a crime yet? Or not convicted of a crime. If Hunter Biden could be charged with a crime, same deal. All right? Joe Biden, same deal. All right? The only difference is, I guess, they'd have to work quick with Joe Biden because he's about to become president of the United States, and then they won't be able to prosecute him until he's out. What are your thoughts on Trump holding election fraud rallies? Look, I guess even the president has his freedom of speech and all that. I think it's nonsense. I think he ought to just concede. But, of course, hey, the grift's got to go on. I guess he's got every right to do it. St. Clark, thank you for gifting a Tier 1 subscription. I really appreciate that, my friend. It is good to have you here with us, especially to Doomscourge. Very cool. Ooh, and guess who farted? This guy joins us just in time to say, Bassy, you are a shitty lawyer to think Democratic election officials did not violate the Constitution in this election. I feel sorry for your law firm. Well, I'll tell you, guess who? Fortunately for you, the market, I suppose, knows better than your nonsense Twitch comment does, and I am... thank the gods in heaven, gainfully and profitably employed. As for the Democrats and the Constitution, perhaps you could elaborate on how the Constitution comes into play here, but I doubt you will. I imagine instead you will drop another ridiculous comment calling me a cuck, realizing perhaps not that you, as a supporter of President Donald J. Trump, have thoroughly cucked yourself beyond all redemption. Jinger says, wait, does the president have the right, if the people vote him out, does he have the right to continue to forever proclaim himself as the president? I suppose he can proclaim until he's blue in the face, but, he will be hauled out all the same. Okay, Kushbai, it is good to have you here, my friend. Welcome, welcome. And by the way, I just want to be clear, before we get started tonight, there is no shame in cuckoldry. A kink is a kink is a kink, and frankly, all kinks that are safe and legal, I think, are A-OK by me. Safe, legal, and of course consensual, although that's obviously, I'd say, implicit in the word legal. So, no kink shaming. Cuck pride, be proud of yourself and what it is you are into. Basket, how many milliliters of mercury is optimal? Well, actually, folks don't know this about me, but I actually, apart from my career in the law, I'm a bit of a chemistry expert, and I've heard that it's always best to get your mercury in 777 milliliter doses. That's what I've heard. Okay. Hey, we've got a hype train going. Jack Thy Streamer, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you joining in here and getting that hype train going. Folks, please do consider subscribing to the channel. I really do appreciate it. We are apparently 12 subscriptions away from 300. So, hey, if you'd like to chip in, hey, I'd really appreciate that, folks. Thank you so much for that. And Marty Blankets, thank you for the 100 bits, my friend. Okay, very cool. Did you really forget what you're going to do tomorrow? Yeah, I think I absolutely forgot. Now, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd love to keep on going, but we've got to try and get this debate going. So, Miller Heat says, Destiny put you on. Well, hey, shout out to Destiny. Very cool. Thank you for that. And I think everybody here is going to really enjoy this discussion. If you haven't heard of Kevin Castley, holy macaroni, I don't think Kevin Castley is a man you're ever going to forget. All right? So, hey, let's get to it. Let me hop in to the whereby here. And I'll be right back. Let me just get this camera set up here real quick, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, there we go. Always forget to get my secondary camera set up. But we're good now. Okay. Hey, Feel Good Always. Thank you for subscribing in Tier 1, my friend. All right. Can you read my question? Capital P, capital L, capital S. I'm guessing that's how you say please. Okay. All right. One more question. Cat Hisorio says, as a genius like yourself, spelled U-R-S-E-L-F, wrong way to spell it. Please never, ever again use the letter U as a substitute for the word you. I will never respond to anything else like this again. Can you give me your opinion on Mr. Supreme Court Antonin Squirrel and, by extension, his friend Amy Beretta, their ideas of viewing and interpreting the Constitution within the olden days? I suppose that's an adorable way of referencing squirrels and other woodland creatures while asking about originalism. I will only say this. I think originalism has its place in the sense that the Constitution ought to have a meaning, and that meaning should not be able to be changed unless the text is specifically amended, right? And so, I think that's important to consider. Because if you imagine that the words just change themselves with time, well, on the one hand, I see the allure, right? Because our society does change with time. On the other hand, that means that the words can change without anybody having any kind of democratic accountability for it. That's a problem. So, Watershead, thank you for subscribing at Tier 1. And holy macaroni, Feels Good Always, thank you for gifting 10 Tier 1 subscription to our marvelous community. I'd love to name everyone involved, but we've got to hop into this debate. So, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Without further ado, let's get going. Okay, knock. And okay. Are you guys here? Let's see. Okay. Dylan? Hey guys, I'm in here when you're ready. Let's see. Kevin, let me see. Kevin, are you in the Discord with Dylan? If not, maybe I can send him an invite. Don't think I can do it. Okay. All right, well, Dylan, I'm sure we'll get him squared away. Okay. In the meantime, all right, so we're getting going here, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, I'd like to thank you all for subscribing. So many cool new subscribers tonight. Thank you so much. Classical Neolib, it's good to have you here, my friend. Thank you very much for that. I'm glad you're excited. And Bad Hoss Simmer, of course, our great friend from Canada who knows horses and loves horses in every sense of the word. It's good to have you here. Thank you so much for that subscription, Marty Blankets. Thank you for the 100 bits. Whereby, isn't this the Discord? Oh, you know, I think, any mix up? Okay.
Yo.
Hey, Dylan, can you invite Kevin?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll invite Kevin to the Discord. Give me a
Okay.
second.
Yeah. All right.
Everybody's just so used to using my Discord for debates now.
Yeah, I thought that's what I figured was that you meant use your Discord.
Yeah, I just invited him.
Okay, very cool.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Very cool. All right. No Nothing is here with us. No Nothing, Twitter's fastest growing top tier memer. No Nothing has actually been cited in British newspapers now. He is such a top tier memer. I hope that you folks are following him here on Twitter.com. So No Nothing, if you'd like to drop a link, please, feel free to do that. he's quite a top tier Twitter personality. So very cool. Indeed, this is we are ready for a big transaction in the marketplace of ideas. Good call, Feznet. I think that'll be a lot of fun. Let's see here. I'll just kind of keep the chatter going while we wait for everything to get set up here. Bazi, don't ruin your reputation for Gundam. Oh, I wouldn't dream of it. Sarsek says, the real question here is whether nuclear weapons have a place in the free market. Sarsek, I don't think they do. I don't think you could ever justify private nuclear weapons, even in the most ANCAP version of Ancapistan, because it's impossible to use them without causing third-party harms.
I mean, Bastia, then how do I walk around with these 2 nuclear bombs on my arms every day? How do I do that legally?
I don't think you do, but if you're referencing the strength of your upper body strength, hey, more power to you, my friend. Okay.
Thank you.
Very cool. Okay. Sir Bola says,
Simra just subscribed.
This better be a nuclear debate. Good one, Bad Hoss Simra. I appreciate that. Very cool. Oh, man. Looks like we've almost got that hype train done, folks. So I think all we need is one more subscriber, and we'll be done with our first hype train in who knows how long. So, hey, thank you so much tonight, folks. Okay, I think we've got the whole gang here. Kevin, are you there?
Okay, I can hear you now. Do you have my video input going on currently?
Yep, I've got you there. Dylan, I don't see you on the whereby.
Oh, give me a second.
Okay.
Okay,
right.
I'm ready.
All right, and hey, one more shout out. Thank you so much to everybody who just subscribed and got us way past that hype train. Very cool, my friends. I'll thank you all individually afterward. But tonight, we've got a real showdown of foreign policy, I'd say greatness. I don't think that would be a word that would be too harsh to use tonight. We've got, I think, 2 sides of foreign policy here on Twitter. We've got Dylan Burns, I think, representing the more pacifist wing, maybe perhaps the more liberal internationalist wing of foreign policy on Twitch and Twitter here. Dylan, do you think that'd be a fair assessment?
Liberal internationalism seems to be the closest you could get to me. It's more a Burnsiite thought, Burnsism, as they say.
How about that? And of course, joining us here, I think for now perhaps the second time on Twitch. Kevin, is that accurate to say?
I've never actually joined Twitch with you guys before. I did the debate against Liz, but that was moderated by Henry, I believe. So I think this is my first time.
Okay, I thought that was on Twitch too. My mistake. Kevin Castley, ladies and gentlemen, on the other side of things, Kevin Castley, the self-described vanguard of the West, a neoconservative, I'd say. Would that be fair to say?
I describe myself as a liberal neoconservative with basically offensive realist characteristics. So.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this is a real difference in opinions here. At the end of the day, there are a lot these two could clash on, but tonight we are going to be discussing a very simple question on all the implications of that question. And that question is, should the United States of America engage in a nuclear first strike against North Korea? And just to be clear, that is the question we're discussing tonight, right, gentlemen? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. There was some discussion over whether it was going to be nuclear first strike in general, but I think Dylan and I, by and large, agreed that it would be more useful to specifically talk about the most pertinent case. So.
Okay, I agree. I think that'll be good. And while we may stray into the broader issues, that's going to be where we anchor things tonight. So a couple of quick ground rules. I think it would be a good idea to start with, of course, the proponent here, Kevin, to make his case for that for a couple of minutes, and then Dylan to have an uninterrupted rebuttal, and then we'll go back and forth. I view my role as facilitating the discussion, so occasionally I may ask questions based on how the discussion is going, but I will also do my best to hold both parties to one another's questions as far as possible. So with that, I'd like us to treat the subject with some respect, especially everybody watching, of course. We are talking about the most destructive weapons in the world today. Weapons that, if used, can take, are absolutely, involve the losses of a lot of lives. So, very serious subject. Let's try and treat it accordingly. But with that, Kevin, if you could get started, what's your case for a nuclear first strike by the United States on North Korea?
Yeah, well, I want to first begin by saying, thanks to Dylan for having me on the channel. It's good to be here. And thanks, Bastiat, for moderating this. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. So to begin with, North Korea. North Korea, in my view, is the number one nuclear threat facing the world, in particular the United States, when it comes to its nuclear arsenal. That's the purpose of it, is to blackmail the United States and potentially attack the United States. It is the case that even though there are countries out there that have a lot more nukes, or that might be in some ways potentially more inclined to work with terrorists, North Korea is the number one issue when it comes to this. And my case for a nuclear first strike is simply that we have in North Korea a rogue state that is arming a strategic capacity to hit all United States cities and bases, which they have the means to do already with the introduction of the Hwasong-15 ICBM back in 2017. They could hit essentially all parts of the United States. They recently rolled out, and I'm sure the viewers, if you guys follow foreign policy, if you watch Dylan Burns here, you guys probably are aware that North Korea recently, back in October, rolled out what we're calling the Hwasong-16. It's not officially being dubbed that yet, but it's the latest and greatest ICBM that they've got. It's rolled mobile. It operates on an 11-axle transport erector launcher. It's capable of going anywhere in the country, rolled mobile, from hardened bunkers, being deployed and launching an ICBM with a range of 16,000 kilometers against targets at the United States. I want to be very clear. The North Korean nuclear arsenal is not just for decoration. It's not simply just a means of deterrent of sorts. It is there to blackmail the United States and potentially to outright attack the United States. No country invests that kind of money, especially not a very poor country such as North Korea, into building an 11-axle TEL with the largest ICBM in the world so that they can hit Japan or South Korea. That, I want to be very clear to the viewers out there, that missile, the address on that's for you. That's for your city. That's for your town. That's not against South Korea. That's not against Japan. They have other means of hitting those. Numerous means of shorter range delivery systems. Furthermore, the main case here is that North Korea has proven themselves 100%, in contrast to the other regimes such as Gaddafi and even Saddam, 100% unwilling in any case to give up or even entertain the idea of giving up its nuclear deterrent, as it calls it, or its nuclear offensive capability, as I would term it. And it is to the point that you could, in all good faith, give them $100 trillion, and they're not going to give it up, because this is the foundation of their political regime at this point. What they seek to do is reunify the Korean Peninsula by any means necessary. And if we go with the most optimal case here, they have these nukes to blackmail America. Mm-hmm. In the worst case scenario, they have these nukes to destroy America. And it is my argument, my contention here, that a wise and prudent foreign policy directive would be to execute an initial strike against North Korea. Now, why specifically nuclear? Because a lot of the North Korean targets are hardened to an extent that other countries don't have. They have the largest underground network in the world when it comes to their assets. Additionally, we've seen the utilization, for example, the MOA, massive ordnance airburst in Afghanistan that targeted ISIS tunnels. That's good against lightly hardened facilities and whatnot, and tunnels and whatnot. But you're going after North Korea with these things. You want to make sure that nothing gets off the ground, because if you do an attack against them, you can't be shocked if they try to retaliate, and they will try to retaliate. And it is my case here that in order to ensure with maximum confidence, not 100% confidence, but as most confidence as you can, a nuclear strike is the best way to eliminate their leadership targets, to disrupt their command and control, and to take out their nuclear targets. I'm not suggesting a counter value approach here. I'm not saying nuke their cities. I'm not saying nuke Sinuiju or anything. I'm saying you hit their leadership and their military, specifically their nuclear assets. Will civilians die? Yes. Civilians are going to die no matter what happens, though, no matter if we wait or we don't. So
okay, so then I think that's Kevin's position here, and with that, Dylan, I think you have 5 minutes to lay your position out. Of course, you can respond too, but let's go from there.
Sure. Personally, I think we should submit. I think we should give up. We should let North Korea annex the United States. That's my primary position. But a lot of people don't like that, and since my primary position will never be accepted, I'll have to go to the next one, which is not nuking North Korea. Now, I want to make very clear before we go into this that I have found more bipartisan support going into this debate than I've ever received in my life. Neocons generally don't like me in my positions. Republicans generally don't like me in my positions. But I've gotten more messages and support from neocons to me before this debate than ever in my life. Neocons messaging me, telling me that they want a neoconservative community that talks about real change, real solutions, and actual things to solve these issues. And that talking about stuff like this brings embarrassment to the foreign policy community on Twitch. Because when we really talk about the supposed nuke pill, it's not red pilling people. It's an international cyanide pill. And calling it anything else is asinine, in my opinion, my humble opinion. Now, I don't come here telling you that I have the solid solution to the solution on the Korean Peninsula. Nobody does. Kevin, I'm sure, would also not say that he has the solution with 100% guarantee that if we nuke North Korea, the problem is solved. Nobody can tell you that. I find it very strange when somebody comes into my chat and asks me, how do you solve Israel-Palestine? Oh, well, if I knew that, I'd be in a much more powerful place and I'd have a lot more money than I currently have. And the same would apply here. But when you talk about helicopter pilots for a second, if I saw a helicopter flipped upside down in a tree, and someone says, and I said, that's not how you fly a helicopter. You'd be like, well, do you know how to fly a helicopter, Dylan? No, but I sure as hell know it's not crashing it into a tree. And that's how I view the nuclear scenario. So I'm going to appeal to well-known pacifist John Bolton and his position on this very concept. John Bolton talked about how this concept is inappropriate and very radical and destructive in nature. And let me just talk about how a few reasons why a nuclear first strike would not succeed in any capacity. The first reason I would give is that any nuclear first strike or military objective we would want to carry out on the North would need to be done with the cooperation of the South Korean government. It would not be able to really be done effectively without their knowledge. And in fact, without their knowledge, we could make the situation worse because they would take actions completely uncoordinated from us. We are never in a million years going to get the South Korean government to agree to any nuclear strike on North Korea. This is for a million different reasons. It's extremely unpopular, is for one. And if we want to be a democratic state and maybe if we go back to the 1950s South Korea, you could get their approval. But I think the evolution from a dictatorship in South Korea is something I am in support of. That's never going to happen. If we were to inform them of this operation, there's a high likelihood they flat out reject it. And if we go forward with it, they just leak it to the international press. They would do everything to prevent this type of a war. Because even if we don't disable all the nuclear weapons, which by the way, we will not. No matter what weaponry we use, we are not going to disable the entirety of North Korea's nuclear arsenal. I mean, if we were to drop nukes all across North Korea, we just carpet bomb them, which is different than what Kevin Cassidy's proposing. He's proposing strategic nuclear strikes on a few locations where they believe the North Korean leadership is. This is the Hermit Kingdom. It is the nation that is the most sacred nation on the planet. We don't even know how many nuclear weapons they have, yet we're going to use nuclear weapons to disable them all. We're going to need to generally know where all these nuclear weapons are if we want to disable them. And if we don't even know the number of nuclear weapons they have, how are we going to carry that out? They're the most secretive nation on the planet. And when it comes to North Korean leadership, the North Korean leadership knows that there's this want to assassinate Kim Jong-un. Something while it'd be nice for him to go bye-bye, I'm also not a fan of that idea either. But let's say we had tried to do this idea of nuking the North Korean leadership and disabling them. He has he has body doubles, he has trains misdirect all the time. We don't even know for a vast majority of the time the location of the Kim family. Not to mention Kim himself. It is a very rare instances that we really know where he is, and if he does want to, and really we know, is because he wants us to know where he is. This is a hermit kingdom, so we have a real deficit of knowledge here to carry out this type of an operation. The type of people that we would need to support to carry out this type of an operation would be unable to get their support, and when it comes to the international backlash to it, it would be overwhelming. Definitely when there's other avenues that we can operate when it comes to our relationship with China. I guess I mean, I agree with John Bolton more on this idea, trying to cooperate with China, maybe cut off oil transports, because historically China has been the supply of 90% of North Korea's oil imports. That would be a much more beneficial way to go into it than the nuclear first strike. Now, I'll finish with this. There's this idea that's heavily pushed that this will be used as a weapon of conquest towards the South. That they'll use these nukes to devastate the South Korean military, which I do want to point out the fact that the South Korean government spends over double what the North Korean government spends on military spending, has much more resources allocated towards fuel, and would be able to fuel the military for a longer period of time, and has a much more effective military capacity when it comes to traditional forces, and more effective interceptors as well. So if we were to respond with nuclear weapons and they were to respond with nuclear weapons, we would have more effective means of doing it, even if interceptors are far from perfect. Even let's disregard the fact that a traditional war the North would lose. I'm finishing up. That would not be a bomb of conquest. You cannot conquer as a suicide bomber. You destroy others, but end up destroying yourself in the process. There you go.
Wow. Well, after that profound ending from His Majesty Dylan Burns over there. By the way, hi, Synth. It's good to see you. See you in the background there. Very cool.
I said hi.
Okay, so lots of different positions here. Let's start with some of these. Kevin made some claims that I think I'd like to start with, and we'll go through some of these. And I think this might be a good way to structure this. So first of all, Kevin, what struck me about what you said is you seem to know not just the capacity of North Korea, but their motive. That these are weapons aimed at the United States, not at the neighbors, not at North Korea's neighbors, but they are aimed at the United States. So, you're going past means and you can ascribe their motive. How do you know what North Korea's motive is in having these nuclear weapons?
Okay. Well, yeah, we can get into it. So,
and by the way, just for the sake of time, I'll try and let's kind of go with maybe 1 to 2 minute responses from here on out. All right?
Okay. All right. Sure. So, essentially, I alluded to the sort of intuition in there in my initial preamble, which is that no country, especially not a country as impoverished as North Korea and with as limited means as North Korea, invests as much as they have into the Hwasong 14, range of about 10,000 kilometers, Hwasong 15, range of about 13,000 kilometers. Now, what we saw recently rolled out a month ago, Hwasong 16 with 16,000 kilometer range. They're not investing that kind of capital. If you're broke, you're not going around and spending money on stuff you don't need. They are specifically targeting those at their prime enemy, which is the United States of America. Now, could these be used against Japan and South Korea? Yes, but it would be kind of like using, a $5 million rifle to to kill somebody who's completely defenseless against the wall. It's like you could just as easily use like a cheap gun, which is what they do in North Korea, by the way. It's a dictatorship. So those missiles, those specific ICBMs, they exist to target and to intimidate, and I would argue to eventually blackmail the United States of America. You could say, oh, well, maybe they're also targeting the United Kingdom and Canada. I would agree that's a possibility too, but that simply bolsters my case here. It's that their intention in having these long range missiles is not to deter an invasion with tactical nukes if anybody tries to mess with them or whatnot. It's to specifically deliver a thermonuclear warhead on Washington and New York and other cities. And we know, based on their test back in 2017, their most recent one, 225 kiloton yield appears to be boosted fission device. My guess is once the new president comes in, has some tough rhetoric on them, perhaps, they will finally test the H-bomb they've probably had lying around for a year or so. That's my view of it. So motive-wise, you don't invest that kind of money to hit your neighbor or to hit Japan. That's for America. That's for you guys. That's for us.
Dylan, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm not going to deny the idea that they don't have nukes aimed at us. They do. I mean, it's already, this is for years. This is old news at this point. The idea that they are making nuclear weapons to strike us or to use them against us or have the possibility of using that weapon. Of course they are. I will not deny that. If I was to deny that, I'd be a liar and a NK simp for the Kim family. And I'm not an NK simp. People sip me, I don't sip others, okay? But when it comes to this idea of North Korea using that nuke against us, I disagree with Kevin on the ultimately of what this nuke would be used for or what would they would do. Because at the end of the day, I acknowledge they have this bargaining chip. I acknowledge they have this destructive capacity now. They of course, have always had destructive capacity with the artillery that could be aimed at civilian centers in the South and other things. But I also know that the North Korean leadership, to stay in power for this long and to have this much power, they're not stupid. They're not a bunch of imbeciles running around. They know that if they were to use a nuclear weapon against the United States or against South Korea or against any of our powers, that they would be wiped off the face of the planet. They are just getting the capacity to strike us. We have had the capacity to wipe North Korea off the face of the planet for decades. There is no way that they will ever be able to match not only our firepower, but the firepower of all of our allies. Because it wouldn't just be the United States that would want to respond in kind. It would be, of course, the Great Britain, France, all of our allies with nuclear weapons. And so I don't see a way where they use these nuclear weapons as more than a bargaining chip. I will say the greatest risk, in my opinion, will always be the idea of the instability of dictatorships and maybe some power surge or something happening, civil war occurring, nuclear weapons getting in the hands of terror organizations. Nuclear terror is going to be one of the greatest geopolitical threats going forward in the world. The idea of nuclear weapons and chemical weapons getting in the hands of terror organizations. But the North Korean government has also showed itself through extremely hard times, famines, and others, to be able to thrive on its evil tendencies and survive. So that is something, when it comes specifically to North Korea, that I have less worries about. But I have worries about that in all states with nuclear weapons. Russia, for example, would be one state I would actually have worries about, with the fact of its money being so tied to oil. So I would say that I see these nuclear weapons being used in a cost-benefit analysis and as a bargaining chip, as a kind of this threatened tool to use towards the world. But they also do, since going through cost-benefit analysis, know that if they ever use those nukes, they'd be wiped out.
What do you say to that, Kevin? I mean, at the end of the day, it seems like Dylan seems to make a pretty persuasive case that nuclear weapons are sort of, you use them, you invite absolute annihilation. So if you say that they are using that their goal is actually reunification, as I know you said in your introduction, of the Korean Peninsula, how can their goal be also to destroy the United States when the use of nuclear weapons would invite their destruction and also presumably frustrate their goal of reunification?
Right. So I just want to clarify my position here. I want to be very clear about something. From the outset of their nuclear program, in the latter days of Kim Il-sung through Kim Jong-il up to Kim Jong-un now, I don't believe they've ever specifically had it as their meditated sort of plan to one day get a magic number of nukes and then fire them all in a salvo against the United States and then and then, as Dylan said, invite the retaliation of the international community. I don't believe that that's their pre-planned goal. The problem is this is the Kim dynasty, and if we accept, if we say to ourselves, we lack the political will to nip this in the bud. We lacked it back before they had nukes, so we definitely lack it now that they have nukes. We're going to accept them as a status quo nuclear power, except it's the Hermit Kingdom. It's the Kim dynasty. It's, as they say, the 10 million year bloodline of Mount Baekdu, where the great leaders are born and told, you guys are invincible, you're God and everything. There's a chance Kim Jong-un even believes that because he's grown up with it his whole life. And the thing is, my worry is that, one of my worries, and I'll ask you this, Dylan, do you believe that at some point, if we accept North Korea as a status quo nuclear power, which means we're not going to denuclearize them, we're not going to use military force against them, we're going to accept this even if we don't like it, that at some point over the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, 800 years, at some point, either Kim or his sister or her kids or one of them one day in a bickerment or just feeling bad or whatever does something rash, my worry would be I don't trust them with that kind of capacity the way that I would trust the Russians. I don't like the fact that Russia has these weapons, but they also don't have people that they think are demigods running them. And my worry is that North Korea is a whole other animal here. And, it's the sort of thing. And this is just one of my worries, of course. We can get into other stuff later on. But I know we're
looking at focus on. Yeah, Dylan, I mean, North Korea isn't just your average nuclear power. I mean, it's a very uniquely terrifying state. So, I mean, are you ultimately saying you're okay with nuclear weapons in the hands of the Kim regime, I guess, forever?
Well, first, I'd like to say Kim is not a demigod. I only worship one God, and that is Jesus Christ. Amen. And I first like to respond to an earlier point you made that I never got to respond to.
Okay.
And that was the idea of, the North Korean spend so much money, over 20% of their GDP, compared to 2% in South Korea. But that 2% amounts to about $35 billion in South Korean military spending, while their 20% amounts to $13 billion, which just shows the power differential and the active personnel. It's like 13 million, possible personnel compared to 6 million. But with that massive amount of spending, that can't just be because, we're doing this because we're going to eventually use these nukes against America. It could also be for the fact, like the IRGC in Iran, the military has a stranglehold on power in North Korea. At the end of the day, money must funnel into the North Korean military. And if Kim was to ever cut off or massively reduce spending in the North Korean military, they'd go off with his head. That demigod status would evaporate, because the military is what ultimately gives us the hold on power. So a lot of this funding, I would say, while it is, of course, beneficial to them strategically to amass power when it comes to their military compatibility with Iran, to America or South Korea, even though they would never be able to touch them, because 20% isn't even close, not even halfway there. It also is a way, as a gift to the people who keep them in power, as a kind of bargaining chip of keep me in power, here's the money. If you ever was to cut that off, they could go off. Now, to this idea, I don't want to accept the fact of them being a nuclear power, but it's already done. Whether we like it or not, they have nuclear weapons, Kevin. I mean, you would not deny that they have nuclear weapons. They are nuclear power. The question is, do we accept this as a long-term thing, them being a nuclear power? Because they currently have nukes. It's estimated by the Center for Foreign Policy, or CTF. One second, I have it somewhere. But it's about 60. It's about 60 from...
about 60. 50 to 60.
Yeah, 50 to 60 is the range, which, again, I bring up the fact that we don't even know the amount of nukes they have. How are we going to strike them all if we don't even know how many nukes they have? But 60 nukes, they have the nuclear weapons. The question is, do we deal with that long term? I think that we should incentivize or find some way to remove those nukes from them. But I also know that if we were to engage in nuclear conflict or direct military conflict, as John Bolton and others have brought up, people that I know you respect highly, that would be extremely dangerous and could lead to the deaths of millions of people, not only through the use of nuclear weapons, but by traditional weapons. Artillery striking the capital of South Korea should kill thousands upon thousands of people. The nuclear weapons being used on, of course, the American homeland, on our allies, on South Korea. Me knowing the consequences of us taking this radical position to try to disable the nukes where we don't even know the location of, again, the most secretive nation in the world, isn't the path I would want to go about this. I am it's hard for me to swallow the pill of a nuclear North Korea, and we should maneuver the best way possible to get rid of the ability of them to have nuclear weapons. I do agree with that, but the nuke pill, which I think I have assessed to be the cyanide pill, is not a pill I'm willing to personally swallow. I think it goes way too far to achieve this goal.
Okay. Well, what do you say to that, Kevin? I mean, is this using a hammer instead of a scalpel?
Well, I want to be very clear about something here when it comes to a nuclear strike against North Korea. North Korea is the only country in the world where this would be the appropriate last resort. I've seen the agreed framework. I've seen the six-party talks. I've seen North Korea pursue, and there were a couple points that Dylan brought up. I do want to get to the point about the bargaining, and as well as using it as a way of gaining favor with the elites in the military. That's a separate point. But on this point, this specific point, North Korea, we did the agreed framework, didn't really go anywhere. They knew what they were doing. Did the six-party talks. They were able to get concessions from it. And then what did they do? They later on admitted that they violated it, and they were just basically trying to maximize the aid that they got now. And they're like, haha, we fooled you. We got your concessions, but we've restarted, we've upped our capacity, we're back to enriching uranium again, and so on. I believe, and I've said this on my channel before, Superpower Broadcasting, I believe that North Korea is essentially that bad guy, that supervillain in a movie where they capture the hero and all that sort of stuff, and instead of doing that long-winded speech where they reveal their plan and everything, they just shoot the hero and then they're done. There's no last-minute Deus Ex Machina to save them or whatever, and it's like, I would have gone away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids. They know. They learned from Saddam. They learned from Gaddafi. Under no circumstances, no matter how much in good faith, you never give up your nuclear arsenal. So for me, there is no option to deal with them apart from a military option. And so for me, the only real debate here about how to denuclearize Korea is either a nuclear first strike or a conventional first strike. Dylan, would you disagree with that? Do you think that there are diplomatic means to denuclearize Korea still?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. There are means that I know will succeed. But I am against, as I agree with John Bolton on this, that we shouldn't do a military strike on Korea, period. That would be my position. The only time I would accept something like that is if we knew there was a strike. Okay, Bastia?
Yeah, wait, just to be clear, it sounded like you're saying, I don't know if diplomacy is possible, but we shouldn't do a strike. Could you just make your position?
What my position is clear is I don't know that diplomacy will succeed in disabling North Korea, but I believe the cost to the civilian population, to our international credibility, and to our relationship with the South is too great to take an action this brash. And that's why this position of nuking North Korea is so widely discarded in the foreign policy community. That's why the most neocons, the most Kissingerite Kissinger followers would never accept such a policy. There's a reason why MacArthur was sacked in the 50s, and the situation has graphically gotten more dangerous than it was during the Korean War. Now, when it specifically comes to diplomatic options, I will say that this is a situation that you brought up the analogy, Bastiat, of the scalpel. This is a scenario where you need to use the scalpel. Now, I personally don't have the solution to this like everybody else in the world, since nobody really does. But there are a few suggestions that I would make. The first would be that Trump's North Korean policy has been a complete failure. You do not go to someone and negotiate and give them international credibility unless you actually have a plan on how that's going to go. You do not quit military drills for literally no reason. Trump basically went into North Korea, offered economic revitalization, stopped these military drills, which are integral to the South's security, and gave Kim international credibility by writing him love letters. It was a failure. And that's not because I'm against the idea of talking with the North, but if you're going to do it, it's a risk. You're going to be basically giving them credibility on the international stage. And if you're going to do that, you need to make sure you're going to make a good pitch of it. And Trump failed drastically. So I would, I guess, align more with John on the idea of, at the end of the day, this policy is not going to succeed unless we talk to how they want to talk to us, because we're the big boys to the South Koreans. We need to talk to China because they're the big boys to the North Koreans.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, my main idea would be like John, increase sanctions.
John
even
Bolton,
though
right?
Yeah, like John, increase sanctions, enforcing the sanctions more brutally than the ones we currently have, but mostly engaging with the Chinese and finding a way we can find a scenario where they would be able to start tightening the amount of trade they put into the North in response, in exchange for the denuclearization of the peninsula. Now, of course, if we were to do such a thing, we can't just bully them into it. We need to be able to offer them something as well, which is where the sticker comes in. That's where the idea of demilitarizing South Korea comes in. That's where it gets difficult.
Well, let me ask you this, Kevin. I mean, isn't that at this point, isn't that where China gets most of its, or sorry, where North Korea gets most of its economic lifeline is through China? I mean, isn't that the way to go rather than rattling sabers, just trying to get the Chinese on board with a peaceful solution? Surely they don't want a nuclear-armed rogue state any more than we do, right?
Well, there were so there are a few points to still address. We'll get to this point.
Okay.
I'll address this point.
Right.
This point about China, we need to understand Communist China, Red China, People's Republic of China. We definitely are misreading their interests if we just assume that they're going to help us out here and just be like, we'll do you a solid, bro. China is noited by North Korea. They're not really fans of having this rogue nuclear state on their border, as Bastiat alluded to there. You know what they're even less fans of? Having an American presence on their border,
True.
having a capitalist democracy on their border to one up them. They're not comfortable with that, and there's a reason China's kind of let this go on, because China has had a lot of influence over them. Now, we would be remiss if we went over the fact that, or if we didn't go over the fact that during the Cold War, during much of the 90s and everything, North Korea was always on the side of the Russians. Moscow, they've always had a tumultuous relationship with Beijing. As close back as 2015 and 2011, they lost some assets, some submarines, and they radioed Beijing, and they're like, can you help us find these? And Beijing said, you guys pulled your dudes from the embassy. You find them yourselves. Like, they're not exactly allies. So China doesn't really like North Korea. So that lends it the idea that maybe we could work with them. The problem is it ignores the fact that the long-run interests of Communist China are such that they're more willing to have a rogue state on their border that they think is more likely to be a thorn in the side of the West, even if it might also kind of be a thorn in their side. They see it as a zero-sum game in which the West loses more than they are to have organize some sort of regime change over there, which they know would also entail a large conflict. And the problem is, we ignore the fact that Communist China is gearing up eventually. And I know that this would bring up another topic for debate, but it's worth mentioning here in passing. Communist China is gearing up for an inevitable conflict with the West, whether that's economic or military. Most serious academics agree that the West and Communist China have irreconcilable differences, and only one will prevail at the end of the day. They're our enemy. They're not our friends. And if we work with them here to get rid of North Korea, they are not going to do so in good faith. And to John Bolton, I like John Bolton, but here's the thing about John Bolton. John Bolton's an offensive realist to the core. He's not going to telegraph his intentions. Now, I'm not saying he wants to nuke North Korea, but I know I followed his super PAC for a long time. He's made a lot of arguments for attacking North Korea. He said the only way to denuclearize Korea is with military means in the past. Now, he might have changed his mind about that, but it's worth noting that it's not just the foreign policy establishment or whatever is against this or whatnot. There was operation plans. There were operation plans drawn up back in 2017, 2018 that called for using about 80 nuclear weapons against North Korean leadership and military targets. Additionally here, what we need to remember is, there was a Pew study that was done just last year, in the summer of last year, that found that 30% of Americans actually are on my side, and not just on my side in the sense that they want to do a military operation against North Korea. No, they want to do a nuclear strike against North Korea. So it's not like some fringe thing that 0.1% support. Now, sure, that means that 70% of people would be more inclined to Dylan's side here, but it should be noted that a lot of people kind of look at what's going on and they can kind of see where things are going here, and we can move on. We can move on to the next topic. It's just I'm not going to work with. I'm
Well,
not
I'd
going
like
to
to
see much coming from communist
respond to
China.
the China thing. I mean, this has gone pretty
Okay,
far off
well,
China.
all right. Now,
So-
just to be clear, the relevant part about China would seem to be the question of whether it's possible to work with them. And Kevin's
Yes.
point is basically, shift to the right, shift to the left. Long story short, it's really not.
Yeah. So my thing is, my proposal would never be this idea of like, okay, China, so put all of North Korea under the control of South Korea, and we'll deploy troops on your border. Please do that, please. Please do tighter sanctions. We'd really enjoy that. That, of course, that would get rejected. When you make deals, any type of deal, whether it be the JCPOA, whether it be an agreement with any nation that we are confrontational with, you are going to have to make compromises. John Bolton specifically said that while it might be past this point, there is a possibility that we could mention the fact that we have troops in South Korea and that North Korea has nuclear weapons and they want our troops gone. We want the nukes gone. That could be something to negotiate. That's something that John Bolton said. Now, I will bring up I have the quote here from John Bolton that I don't think a military strike is an appropriate course of action. This is from this year. So maybe he switched it away from this position. And I will say that at the end of the day, while you can look at polling data to generally show how a population feels about something, I'll also say that 30% of the population are also not going to be that educated in foreign policy. And I can easily just say, well, the 30% are stupid then. Now, when it comes specifically to working with China, when it comes to the idea that, well, at the end of the day, they don't want that, I would just bring up the fact that you're going to have to compromise with them in this type of scenario, and the nuclear option takes away any chance of compromise. And I want to put a question to you because you put a lot of questions my way. We don't even know how many nuclear weapons North Korea has. 50, maybe 60. We don't know. We never really know the location of the North Korean leadership. We don't know where they would make these types of orders from. We think they have chemical weapons. We don't really know. We know they have a general range of artillery barrages that they could do against the south, but we don't know all the locations of where these artilleries are dug in. A lot of them are in the sides of mountains. We have general ideas. For such an operation where one bomb could end the lives of millions of people in America and South Korea and all of that, how can we work and do such a strategic operation that would need to be go perfectly to present the deaths of millions? How can we do that when we don't even have all the data of where these things are located? We would need to carpet bomb the entirety of the North with nuclear weapons.
Yeah, so that's one more question I'd like to ask on this point, and then I think there would be a transition to another kind of line of questions. Kevin, that's a point Dylan's brought up a couple of times now. I don't know that you've answered it yet, or maybe you have and I just missed it.
No, I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Okay, how would you ever even, suppose you were on board with this idea, how would you ever even know? You've described it as a hermit kingdom several times now. I mean, how could you ever really know that you got all the targets you need to get before they can fire back? I mean, how would you ever have the perfect information necessary? Or is it not necessary?
So that's a good question. That's a really good question there. And the thing is, right now, if you do research on this and you look into various estimates, you'll find some estimates on the very low ball that speculate that they have 10 to 15 nukes, and on the high ball that they have up to 200 nukes. They probably don't have 200. The actual U.S., as far as unclassified reports that you can get, it's between 50 and 60, like Dylan said. So if we just go with that and say 50 to 60 is the range and say that there's a 15% error there, my question then would be, in 15 years, 17 years, in 18 years, if we follow the same arsenal growth trajectories, but on a per capita basis relative to North Korea, say they have 1,500 to 1,800. Now your uncertainty is 300 nukes, which is 6 times the magnitude of the absolute stockpile they have today. In other words, yes, the uncertainty is a problem. In 15 years, it's going to be exponentially greater of a problem, and it becomes a lot harder. And so for me, just to kind of get specifically to what Bastiat was asking there about, is it necessary that 100% with 100% confidence? In any military operation, you never know with 100% confidence where everything is, and that you make sure that you've got everything. I want to be very clear here. The nuclear first strike that I'm proposing is phase 1 of an operation to take out the Kim regime, to neutralize the regime. It would be followed by a conventional invasion. But the first strike is to take out their leadership, and they have a very centralized leadership such that if you are able to hit their leadership targets. The branches of the military are largely in the dark from one another in order to prevent a coup and all that kind of stuff. You hit the leadership compounds, you hit the known assets that they have. Now, I mentioned that the Topals or the tells that they have are real mobile, so some of them you might find them outside via immediate and urgent surveillance. They probably they track these things. I don't have access to that, by the way. There's a chance the CIA doesn't even right now, but in the run up to this, you'd want to get very good information. A lot of it's going to be underground. You know where those underground facilities are. That's one of the reasons why you go with nuclear over conventional, is that a nuclear payload vaporizes far more material than even a Moab would by a large order of magnitude. And the other thing here was about is it necessary at the end of the day? No, in all likelihood, one or two tells not be caught up in this. Will one leave a bunker that was missed, or perhaps a missile was shot down that was aimed for that? It's possible, and then we deal with that when it comes to it. Right now, my guess is if you went in and everything, you might find a few that stray through the net, and they basically they are directed at perhaps targets in South Korea, targets in Japan, targets in the United States. I would much rather, and even under the assumption that ground-based interception can't stop it, which in the U.S. ground-based interception has about 40% success rate based on tests that have been done, in which case each one probably gets through, but some of them probably get shot down. I'd much rather lose one Air Force base or one urban area than wait for 15 years from now, where they can credibly, even if you shoot down 40%, take out all of your territory, or I should say all of your cities, all of your bases,
So I think
I have a lot of things to respond to there, because this is the crux of my argument. This is the crux of my argument, really.
Yeah.
So first off, the operation you're talking about, and I know you've said, I've heard in the past, we've had private conversations before about this very topic. Your idea is that this would be kind of like, it would be secretive. It'd come out of nowhere. You wouldn't want to lead up to it and it happens, because you wouldn't want the North to be prepared. Again, ideal. Yes, that would be the ideal scenario. If you lead up to it, then they're ready. They have people constantly ready to fire the nuke, and if right when the first thing hits, they're all launched. South Korea, again, will never, under any circumstances, cooperate with us in any operation like that. Not only Moon Jae-in, who you would probably disagree with on a million things at the end of the day. There's somebody who has built liaison offices which have been now blown up. There's somebody who's completely different philosophy to you. Even almost the most, you would have to go to the most far of the far right in South Korea to find anybody who would support this. The South Korean government wants, okay, Beth,
Dylan, can I pause you to ask simply, Kevin, yes or no, do you think it well, maybe not yes or no, does it matter whether South Korea agrees with this, in your opinion, yes or no?
Well, if I were the American president, or if I were the national security advisor of the American president, my advice would simply be, whatever you do, don't, and this is probably going to happen down the road after Moon Jae-in is out. I've called Moon Jae-in, by the way, Korean Tulsi, tanky Tulsi Gabbard. I'm not a fan of her, but anyway, I would say,
would you seek their permission?
Don't tell the South Koreans. Don't tell the South Koreans.
Okay, all right. So they're not okay. So they're not material. They're really okay. I just wanted to get that position here, because Dylan brought that up a couple times.
So okay, let's count out the South Koreans in this operation. So this would be a secretive operation out of nowhere. So it'd be hard to kind of like, you talk like a slow deployment of the U.S. Navy or something. It'd be an operation not conducted from South Korean airspace. It would have to be done like basically off of boats, off of aircraft carriers. These strikes would have to be done, and we do it without the coordination of any of our allies in the region, because Japan wouldn't help us, of course, if not even so. No coordination from any of our allies. Prepared responses to how this would actually, not only would it make it more difficult to even conduct this operation, which we don't even have all the information. I do want to emphasize when you say, well, maybe that's a 15%, we miss one or something like that. Again, this is the most secretive nation on the planet, and we have a general range from CIA released documents of 10 nukes, 10 nuclear weapons.
10 is the error.
10 is the error. So 10 being the error ratio means that it's pretty likely at the end of the day we'd end up missing some. And then you have interceptors, which, and if we basically know we're going to miss some, and interceptors only have a 40% rate, let's say we miss half of the 10. Let's say we miss half of them if it's an area of 10. We'll just go with half. I'll be generous to the United States military. And it's a 40% rate. They maybe shoot down 2. That means 3 nuclear weapons that obliterates Seoul, obliterates this urban center, obliterates U.S. military forces. One of my things I've always, I've kind of agreed with John Bolton on is moving South American forces down to the tip of Korea, because it actually puts them in a more safe position for a later response if an offensive ever happened. But this would lead to the deaths of millions. That compounded with, since your conventional invasion would follow after, you would not be able to disable the artillery that would be bombarding these civilian centers, that would be bombarding the South Korean military, that would be bombarding the military that at the end of the day, I do believe has the capability to beat the North, due to just how much more money is put in, how much more reserve personnel they could deploy at the end of the day, due to the 13 million difference of ability to recruit. But this is also compounded, the horrific civilian disaster, with the fact of, since the South Korean government doesn't know, they don't evacuate anyone. Everyone's still in Seoul. Everyone's still in the border area. There would still be tours going on the border region, most likely, during this operation.
And that gets to, I think, the next kind of line of questioning I wanted to get into here, which is Seoul, which is about 30 miles from the border, I think, at most, of North and South Korea. Seoul, the capital of South Korea, about 10 million people. Pyongyang, I guess the likeliest place you'd find the North Korean leadership for a decapitation strike of some kind. Population about 3 million people. Any way you slice it, I know you've mentioned, Kevin, that civilians are going to die in war, and perhaps they'll die either way, but I mean, we're talking about major urban centers that would suffer serious, that would be faced with serious military conflict. How do you determine what civilian casualties are acceptable before proposing something like this, especially, in the circumstances Dylan described?
So let's start with the artillery pieces, because that one's interesting. That's actually...
Can I just give a quick background here? What I think you two have been talking about are the artillery in North Korea that are positioned and fixed in terms of their target on the city of Seoul in South Korea. As far as we know, there's no real way to stop
nuclear weapons
them from...
well.
Okay, and then, sorry, I won't...
Possibly chemical weapons on top of that.
All right, please go ahead, Kevin. I should just let you go on that.
I just want to be very clear on that one, because that's going to probably, I'm sure you guys have it planned out that we're going to talk about miniaturization. I haven't seen any evidence to indicate that they've miniaturized any sort of significant yield device to fit onto an artillery shell. America did that. It was Atomic Annie. That's kind of tough to do. Looks like ICBMs, ballistic missiles, probably is their delivery mechanism, bombers, that kind of thing. Let's just be clear. The artillery that we're working with right now, it's going to be conventional. It might be chemical, some of the warheads. They have 13,600 approximate artillery pieces, mostly in hardened facilities, that are trained on targets within, as Bastiat mentioned, about 50 miles or so of the demilitarized zone. A lot of those are clustered such that their range puts most of the northern area of Seoul in their crosshairs. I want to be very clear about something here. It's a moot point, because say North Korea had 0 nuclear weapons. Let's say we were back in 2001. They had 0 nuclear weapons, 1998, 0 nuclear weapons. They didn't get nukes till 2006. How many artillery pieces did they have trained at Seoul then? Around 13,000 still. So they've always had those. So doing any sort of military option to take out the Kim regime necessarily entails that they're going to fire artillery shells at Seoul. That we know that going in, that happens either way, whether you do nukes or they've got nukes or not, no matter what you do. So it raises the question then, and I know we kind of briefly talked about this before, but for me personally, I view it, and I've been following North Korea, and it's something I talked about on my stream and stuff. I've been following North Korea, casually and in some parts more intently since I was about 12, 13 years old. I'm almost 27. That's most of the time, that you've been alive, Dylan. I've been following this for a long time, man. Yeah. And the thing is, I gotta say, I don't think that diplomacy has any chance of working here. Therefore, a war is inevitable. We can argue that a nuclear war is not inevitable. That's a debate, but the people are going to die in Seoul no matter what happens.
Well, let me ask
So-
you something about that I'm curious about before Dylan gets to this. When you say it's inevitable, I mean, I know that there are examples where that hasn't happened. Like, for example, the Soviet Union existed for a long period of time as a nuclear armed power, and they never ended up firing the missiles at anybody, and they dissolved relatively peacefully. So, like, what makes you say that it's inevitable?
Oh, let's be clear. Nuclear war with North Korea, them attacking America, isn't inevitable with nukes. War on the Korean Peninsula, and I know we're still technically in one, but the Korean War going hot again is inevitable. It is inevitable. I can go through my reasoning if you want, but I know I've been talking for a little while.
Okay.
Dylan probably
All
wants
right,
to respond.
go ahead.
So I want to say that yes, you've been following Korean politics ever since possibly before my birth. Which I would just say surprises me that you hold this position if you've been following it for 19 years. But again, I'm going to bring up this fact that it isn't the fact that they've just now gotten artillery or they're going to put nukes on artillery. It's all these things compounding the death toll. Like if there was a flare up in the 60s when they were trying to assassinate South Korean leadership, or that, and let's say we spurred out into the war that they were trying to bug us into, then because they saw that South Korea was becoming a burgeoning economic power, they were expanding economically, and they were scared of this. And they did a few prods. They tried to assassinate the South Korean president at the time. Let's say it happened then you could look at that artillery death toll, what of course happened, and there would be civilians killed under the artillery. The thing is, it's that plus the chemical weapons, plus the nuclear hellfire, plus the thing we haven't talked about, how China would be involved in any such conflict on the Korean Peninsula, which greatly would expand the amount of civilians that could possibly die to a conflict that could outbreak not only on the sea, but if they were to compound the North Koreans' military protectiveness. Because I agree with you on something you said earlier. This idea that China deeply does not want the North Korean government to go away, not because they love them. They actually don't like them at all, really. They really think they're a bunch of, they mess with them internationally. It makes it difficult for them to maneuver on the international stage. And they're a constant thorn in the side, because when every time a power goes and interacts with China, they're almost like, you ever going to deal with your little brat over here? But they are more fearful of the South Koreans just taking over because of the military presence of America being there. And we can see from their aggressive stances in the South China Sea that they are being more bold in this action. But if that is the case, then if North Korea was to engage in this, so if we were to engage in that, if that is so fearful, which you have put out of this dominance from South Korea because of the presence with America, then if this scenario wasn't to play out, wouldn't China inevitably get involved? Whereas if they were to do an offensive on us, there'd be a lot less likelihood for them to do that, and it would be a lot more likely for them to actually come to the negotiating table in that scenario, due to the fact the international pressure would be on them and not us.
Okay.
Hey, I want a point of clarification. When you say them doing an offensive on us, you mean North Korea
attacking South Korea with nuclear weapons, then a conventional offensive.
So you're willing to wait for them to start the war on their terms when they're
no, because I don't think they will. I don't think they will. That's the
difference. Okay, but I think not with nukes, but I think the war is inevitable. So we're at a.
I disagree with that, but I want you to. We can get into that. That's the next topic.
That's,
but I'd like
an important.
To what I just said, though.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to discuss. The inevitability question seems to be one that this all turns on, because if it's not inevitable. Like, if you could really look in the future and say, yeah, war with these guys is inevitable one way or another, so just rip off the Band-Aid, then Kevin's point makes a lot more sense. If, on the other hand, you can demonstrate that it's not inevitable, then Kevin's point doesn't really make much sense, because then you can weigh the question of what you're doing against what, I guess the status quo. So, I guess, Dylan, do you think it sounds like you don't concur it's inevitable. Why is it not inevitable then? Because Kevin has painted a pretty, he's painted the case for it being inevitable.
I don't think it's inevitable, because while these scenarios for negotiation, and I would like to hear an answer to the death toll thing I responded to and the China thing I pushed. Okay. But we'll get to this for a second. Hopefully we can move back to it at some point.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think it's inevitable for a few reasons. Number one, why it is difficult. Negotiation is always difficult, definitely on divisive issues like this. There are still negotiation opportunities available when it comes to positioning of our troops and the leverage we have in comparison to the leverage North Koreans have. There's a lot of leverage to trade around with. Obviously, Trump did it in the dumbest way possible when it came up up to giving up military drills for literally nothing, giving him international legitimacy. There's always, of course, the aid question, how they want to get aid and always want to siphon it from the international community. They'll say for a famine, and then they'll funnel it to the military. There's of course maneuverability on the issue of our troops being present in South Korea. There's a lot of things that could be traded or moved when it comes to the international stage. And there's with two negotiators too, not only North Korea but with China, making two avenues for negotiation. China the more likely one. That's the first reason.
Dylan, when has negotiation with North Korea worked in the past?
Has it? No, it hasn't worked in the past.
So it is your contention then that it
hasn't worked in the past, but a nuclear first strike would never work, and unless you wanted to achieve a complete humanitarian disaster. Unless your idea of a victory is millions of Koreans dead, then no, it wouldn't work. But let me finish my point on that. That's the first point. That it hasn't worked yet, but doesn't mean you stop trying. For example, negotiation between the Palestinians and Israelis hasn't worked yet, so fuck it. Let's do another Intifada, and the Israelis should just carpet bomb the Gaza Strip. That's a ridiculous position, and we all acknowledge it, right? That'd be a stupid position to have, and I think that could be applied here as well. While of course this hasn't worked up to this point. All you really do to have an option without going to full balls down, millions dead, is to try to continue to pursue this. Now, to my second point, when it comes to China and all this, the rest of this involvement, give me a second. I kind of was diverted for a second. Give me a second. Okay, cost benefit analysis. Whether we like it or not, I know you've studied international relations. I believe you majored in poli-sci. I'm also studying international relations. Cost-benefit analysis is done on the international stage when it comes to like making agreements, making arrangements. They do know that if they were to do a nuclear strike on South Korea, they would face one. And the idea that China would support them through a conventional military operation, which would follow such a nuclear strike, when they would be facing a force that has much better supplies, much more funding, much easier access to fuel, much easier access to international weapons markets, a much bigger personnel capacity, 13 million compared to 6 million, almost double the funding, and they only use 2.7% of their GDP. They could increase that spending. Let's say they increased it to 20% of the GDP like the North Koreans do. They would leave them in the fucking dust. So they would inevitably, for any type of operation like this, when they'd be facing not only the force of the South Korean government, but then the American government as well, and its international allies, they would need the support of China, which would not be provided in any such operation. So I know that the North Koreans understand the situation they're in, where if they were to use this nuclear weapon against the United States, one would be forced towards them. Okay. If they were to use a nuclear weapon, which I think you would propose against South Korea, one would be used against them. Not only would it obliterate its civilian population, but it would obliterate its military position as well.
Okay, yeah. A lot of points there. I guess here's the thing. What I wanted to get at originally here with this line of questioning is, how many people is it worth losing before you decide, let's not do this? Like, suppose we could posit, Kevin, that the price of any such first strike would be, say half the population of the city of Seoul. In your mind, 5 million people. Suppose that's our casualty count. 5 million people plus, the fallout of the use of nuclear weapons, like literally the fallout. In your view, if war is inevitable, is that a worthwhile? Are those acceptable losses, or how would you decide what losses are acceptable before talking about a first strike on North Korea?
So we should put this into perspective first. There were some points in Dylan's response that I wanted to get to, but to answer your question here, 5 million. That's a bit of a high count. That with the conventional military that they have, we have to remember they have 17,000 bomb shelters. But Dylan's right to note that they wouldn't be in the bomb shelters the second the barrages start. But wouldn't be 5 million. But for the sake of the hypothetical,
any number, just how do we determine what loss is acceptable and what is not?
First, I just want to put something into comparison because, you brought up the example, 50% of Seoul, 5 million people. On my stream, Superpower Broadcasting, about a month ago, I went through what would happen if the North Koreans used a Hwasong-16 armed with a primitive thermonuclear device, analogous to America's first thermonuclear device, Ivy Mike, 10.4 megatons, and detonated it at an optimal burst altitude over New York. And further, we said, well, their stuff is inaccurate. Let's assume they missed by 13 kilometers and it detonates over southeastern Brooklyn. 5 million dead. 5 million dead from one bomb. Now they're gearing up. I don't think they're going to do anything, make any moves until they have somewhere between 1,500 and 1,800 weapons. Again, I don't think they're planning a first strike. It's for blackmail purposes so they can take the South, but we can get into their end game later on. I don't think they're not planning to use these things, but they might in a rash rage. Either him, his kids, his sister, whatever. They're crazy. Anyway, to answer the question about acceptable losses and everything, I would just want to understand the sort of reasoning here, because you're saying 5 million dead in Seoul. Are we talking from conventional, or are we assuming they're going to use nukes on South Korea?
Here's the situation. The situation is, in any war, we agree that there will be casualties, and in a war on the very densely populated, very heavily armed Korean peninsula, there might be very massive casualties. And in the situation you describe, where there is at least one nuclear weapon is used by the United States on North Korea, there will certainly be collateral damage. There will certainly be radioactive fallout. So how do you determine what amount of civilian casualties is acceptable here? Because it seems like any way you slice it, they are likely to be massive.
Oh, yeah, I want to be clear. The Korean War itself was conventional. And just for the record, there was a point, I believe Dylan might have made about Douglas MacArthur being fired. He wasn't fired because he specifically wanted to use the 60 nukes against China and Manchuria. It was because he disobeyed his superior, which was Truman. He went outside the chain of command, and he was fired for that specific reason. Truman disagreed with him, but he was fired for not obeying Truman. It was a bit more nuanced than that. Truman actually used nukes, by the way. He's the only U.S. president that actually used nuclear weapons. He used 2 of them. But I think that in the case of the civilian death toll, to answer, the hypothetical of, what's an acceptable range of casualties, we need to understand something here. And then people have told me before, they're like, well, how do you liberate North Korea if you're going to use nuclear weapons against their strategic facilities and all this? And it's like, look, I want to be very clear about something. We have windows of opportunity. Dylan basically talked about a window of opportunity, which was when they got nukes. And you had applied, Dylan, or implied rather, they have nukes. Now it's kind of too late to really do anything. I disagree. There are always a few stages of windows of opportunity. First window, of course, is they don't have nukes yet. Then they get the atomic bomb. First couple tests, 2 kilotons, then 8 kilotons, then in the early 2010s, 17 kilotons a couple times. Now they're at 225 kilotons. Pretty soon they're going to have 10 megatons. That's a big difference. So big windows of opportunity. We still have time to act before they have a huge thermonuclear arsenal. They don't have that yet. A few atomic bombs, 60 atomic bombs, that's not big, massive 10 megaton ranges or anything, but it can still do a lot of damage. As far as the hypothetical casualty counts go, this is about saving us. If the West, if America goes down, there's no liberating Venezuela. There's no liberating Iran. There's no liberating anybody else. This has transcended any liberation attempt in the North. Furthermore, that they have orders and they've had orders for a long time to just shoot the concentration camp prisoners the second the Americans invade, nuclear or not. So we're not saving anybody over there. This is about saving ourselves before we lose our city.
Hey, wait. So your position, just to be clear, is that there really is there's no limit to the acceptable number of casualties in the Korean Peninsula.
They're on the southern end of a northern rooted peninsula with nowhere to go. It's not a good position to be in. We should have taken them out before they got nukes. This is a lesson for the future with Iran and all these other cases. You go in before they get the first A-bomb. By the way, that scenario, that 5 million could very well have died without North Korea even having nukes. So I just want to be very clear about that. That's why it's kind of a moot point about the artillery, because that was always there and it will be there. So to say, oh, we should, this changes things or something. No, it doesn't. We knew this 30 years ago. And so the question is, there's going to be a war at some point. They're going to retake the Korean Peninsula. We should probably take them out first rather than be on the receiving end of that, because I want to be very clear about something. In nuclear war, things move very quickly. I've talked about this before on my program. This idea that, like, in the movies where, like, you find out, Mr. President, the Russians, they launched 200 nukes at us, and the president's like, okay, we get the football out and we enter into the code, and all the bombers are like, oh yeah, it's verified, let's go. No, we've seen how Katrina was handled. I like Bush, but he kind of bungled it. We saw how Trump bungled a bunch of stuff. Chances are, nuclear salvo gets launched at some point, there's going to be a lot of miscommunication. It's going to be bungled somehow, and you're going to lose a lot of silos, a lot of bases, a lot of targets, maybe the White House, before America has a coherent response plan. Because a lot, like Reagan even admitted, he didn't even think about nuclear war for his first 3 years.
So as far as the subject at hand though goes, civilian casualties, it would be fair to say your position is really, it's a wash any way you slice it. They're all basically doomed.
Well, fewer will die today if we do this, and if we wait for them to start war on their terms in 15 years, a lot more will die then. Because right now, it's mostly going to be within 50 miles of the demilitarized zone. 15 years, it's mostly going to be east of San Francisco. So. Okay,
Dylan, what do you say to that?
First, I want to say about Douglas MacArthur that it is true that it was a disobeying him that was the final straw, but it was the final straw that broke the camel's back. And it was not only that, but it was also the multiple policy disagreements. And he made the ultimate calculation that if you have a general in the area, you want that general to basically carry out your policy. And combining somebody who disagrees with your policy with somebody who also disobeys orders is a dangerous combination. For a general, and so it was one of the many factors that led to Douglas MacArthur's firing. But yes, it was not the only reason he got fired. It was one of multiple reasons he got fired. Now, I do want to point out the fact that you just admitted that this is a thing that goes really fast. The things will be bungled. This has been something that's never happened before. A large-scale nuclear war. We've launched nukes on 2 occasions, and they are nukes that would not be comparable to what we are going to be playing with now when it comes to speed, how we deliver them, the amount being used, the amount being striked. And you said where there's going to be possibly 60, maybe in a different range. That's our estimate. And it's the 10 nukes that are in that margin of error. But this is just what the CIA thinks is going to happen. And you add chemical weapons to the mix and conventional cluster munitions, and I do want to make a distinction for chat. Cluster munitions are more disastrous for civilians than normal munitions. And if you look into the conflict that is now apparently possibly ending in Armenia due to a recent announcement, you could see how that tore apart Armenian and Azerbaijani civilians recently. And so cluster munitions being used on top of chemical weapons, on top of nuclear weapons, on a South Korean civilian populace, on top of the North Korean civilians that we will be killing through our strikes, men, women, and children, it's going to be a massive amount of death and loss where there will be errors made even if everything went perfect due to us not even having the correct data. But you're adding on top of that, inherent in nuclear war, you will bungle things due to how fast it goes, how quick everything is. It isn't like the movies.
My point. Just to clarify, my point was you don't want to be on the receiving end because of that. If you're the one initiating it, nuclear war favors the attacker.
Yes. So we will bungle things up and possibly kill even more civilians through us bungling shit up.
I want to be very clear. The initiator, well, there are sometimes communication issues, is not prone to that level of issues as if you're on the receiving end and you got 40
minutes. So they would bungle things up. So they might mess up with nukes. And do something even more disastrous.
Probably take out their leadership.
You do like, so it's chemical weapons, artillery weapons, and they have a very small and nuclear weapons. They have a small period of time to respond, and they respond within that very small time period, possibly with 60 nuclear weapons being the high estimate that we're working with here, possibly, and that it has, to your own admission, there is a tendency to bungle up. To your own admission.
But we're striking them first and taking out.
Yes, and so they respond very quickly and bungle it up. Couldn't you not see how that could lead into more South Korean civilian casualties or American casualties? If they send it over, you already have admitted that they can currently strike American shores.
So we need to bear in mind the magnitude here, because what I'm talking about is out of the blue, out of submarines, you launch some Tomahawks with like B-61 warheads, that kind of thing. You take out the known positions and whatnot. Look, we need to understand their missiles right now are still liquid fuel. They still take time to get operational. Now they can do it pretty quickly. It's a lot better than it was 10 years ago, right? They're not going to probably get very many off the ground. The ones that they get off the ground, in other words, are going to be ones that the first strike missed. The first strike is going to hit its targets. That's going to happen probably before they get enough time to get their stuff away. They're going to be in disorder and confusion. But my question to you, Mr. Burns, would be, would you rather be in that position, running around, not sure what to do, and having that communication error in 15 years, 20 years when they start the war on their terms and you lose a ton of your assets, or would you rather they be in that position?
Well, I don't think. Well, of course, I've already said that if I believe a strike is imminent from North Korea, then yes, we should strike. Because that at the end of the day, if I believe it is imminent, if we've gotten a credible report that North Korea is about to launch nuclear weapons against the United States, then of course we would have to make the very tough decision to ensure the deaths, to hit a button that would kill millions upon millions of people. The difference is, and we're going to get to that hopefully maybe at some point, that I disagree that is guaranteed if we don't strike them first nuclear. And so we've already both agreed to different extents and through a lot of going back and forth that civilians will die and the North Korean death toll is going to be absolutely massive. But I do also want to bring out that we are determining for another state, without working with them, South Koreans in a democratic country, that possibly millions of them could die, and their country, who they consider their country of the North, we know for sure millions could die because in this operation that would happen. We are guaranteeing for them that when they consider them their brothers and sisters, they are a democratic nation. And we are going to decide for them without working with them, without even telling them. One day they're going to wake up and millions are dead. Possibly millions of people in South Korea and millions of people who they consider their countrymen in the North dead. And that is guaranteed through this operation. And doesn't this sound kind of like the vestiges of American kind of like dictatorship, American-sponsored dictatorship in the South, where in the 50s we had a South Korean, American-backed South Korean dictatorship where we kind of, told them kind of which policies to follow. And in this case, we just completely disregard their democratically elected government and ensure the deaths of millions. We tell them, fuck you, we don't care, South Koreans, millions dead. That's the position.
Are you saying that America shouldn't have worked with the South Korean dictatorships?
No.
Because they were bulwarks against communism during the Cold War. I just want to
I'm saying I do believe we should have involved in the Korean War. I think that's one of the wars America's fought that it was rightful to be involved in. But I also think the South Korean dictatorship was distasteful, if you want to disagree with me on that, on the executions of people who were supposed communists getting blown up in the back of the head. Maybe No Gun Ri would be something I would also be pointed to. Now, the South Korean government ignored No Gun Ri and the strafing of civilians and different things like that.
They weren't communists? You don't think they were real
communists? So you're telling me that everybody who was shot in the back of the head and the massive slaughter by the South Korean dictatorship weren't communists? And even if they were,
guys, I think we're kind of getting wrapped up in the minor details, relatively speaking, compared to the bigger issue of like acceptable civilian casualties.
Well, I think this is just showing Kevin's complete disregard for life on the peninsula.
You do understand the Cold War was a different era. America worked with Pinochet. So, Pinochet killed people too.
Oh yeah, when we strafe babies and women under a bridge and No Gun Ri, that's like, it's communism, so whatever.
But we're just supposed to let the South fall to communist insurrection and then not the whole world.
No, but I don't think you need to shoot refugees to be communism. I don't think you need to shoot refugees to be communism.
Policy during the Cold War, we would have never worked with any unsavory actors. We would have lost. Look up the Kirkpatrick.
I understand in foreign policy you need to work with unsavory actors, but that doesn't mean you need to give direct orders, or and maybe in some instances indirect orders, to shoot refugees because there might be communist infiltrators. And you can at least try to check the partners you work with who rely on you and say, hey, maybe massive executions of civilians isn't the way to go. But I think from the general policy shown here, you don't care about that.
Executions of civilians, while they happened, were nothing compared to upwards of 8 million people that the North has killed since 1948.
That isn't a justification.
The only thing I would say here is that while I understand your point, Kevin, that, hey, look, we deal with unsavory regimes for the sake of avoiding more unsavory or curbing more unsavory regimes. Your point earlier did seem to sound like you were saying, look, the Korean Peninsula is an acceptable loss for the sake of the cause of freedom all around the world. And so it does, I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding your point here.
Okay.
It does sound like you're saying, look, if we got to write the whole thing off, look, we should have solved this sooner. That's just the way the cookie crumbles.
We should have solved it sooner. 30 years of negotiations. To Dylan Burns' point earlier about how you keep trying and you keep trying. I understand, and I can understand, like, if it's in sports or if it's in school, that kind of, you want to admire that, you know, you're not going to be deterred by a few failures. You're going to get back up here on your feet and keep trying. The problem is we have windows of opportunity. The longer we try this and the more times we fail, the bigger their arsenal gets. And to the point about the uncertainty, right now we're uncertain of about 10, though that's in unclassified the stuff that we have access to. It's probably not 100% certain, even with the classified information. But here's the thing. In 15, 20 years, Dylan, do you think that the error of uncertainty would be lower? Because in my view, even if it's the same percent, that magnitude is now going to be, we're unsure of about 150. Do they have 1,500? Do they have 1,650? I'm not comfortable with them gearing up for that. I know what they're doing, and I want to stop them and nip them in the bud. They're relying on us not having the political will to act so that they can buy time to eventually blackmail America, take the South unilaterally, and even in the best case scenario where no nukes get launched whatsoever, that means that America just got completely cucked on the world stage. South Korea's red. The whole world now understands that American security guarantees mean nothing. There's 30,000 American prisoners of war in the north. And now all the countries in Eastern Europe call up Vladimir Putin or whoever's in charge and say, hey, look, we know we're NATO, but we know that that doesn't mean anything anymore. What can we do so that you don't turn us into the Melians, you know, that you don't just enslave us, bro? Because that's the thing, the vanguard of liberty, the sake of our civilization is at stake here. And, you know, to answer the point about hypotheticals, I'll tell you this. Whatever hypothetical death toll is going to be a hell of a lot higher in 15 or 20 years when it's on their terms than it is on ours. So
gentlemen, I just want to say I think we should go on for maybe 10 minutes more. Since we're going for about an hour and 20 minutes here.
That would be.
So let's maybe, Dylan, if you could respond, and then maybe we'll do some closing statements. Is that all right by you, Kevin?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a lot. Like, realistically, we could probably go here for 10 hours.
Yeah, we could do this all day.
Okay.
Probably.
All right. Well, hey, let's do a little more back and forth, and then in 10 minutes we'll do some closing statements. All right.
So, I do want to also bring up the fact on top of the other. I do want to first respond to the idea of, like, it's 60. That's an estimate, but just because it's a rough estimate with a 10 margin of error, but that's out of our guess because we don't even know that that's the numbers we're working with. That's a general estimate the United States is making. And with that general estimate, that doesn't mean we know the location of these facilities, meaning we could have a general idea of how many nukes they have, but a lot of these facilities we could strike thinking they're nuclear facilities, and they're not. The North Koreans have worked in this way for a very long time. And the idea of, like, hey, Kim's actually over here. We know he's over here. Wait, no, actually, that was a body double. Fuck, never mind. The train was there to kind of dissuade his transportation train. I was over here. And, actually, we believe that the nukes are here, but actually, maybe they're over here. We don't know. This is the most secretive the most secretive nation on the planet. It is the Hermit Kingdom. It goes by that secretive margin. So that margin of risk, I just want to push one more time. But here's another thing. An operation like this has never been tried in the history. We've almost tried it once during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was stopped by very brave and bold men and women on submarine ships who didn't want to turn the key. And knowing that this has never been tried again, this would be one hell of a fucking test run, don't you think? Where millions could possibly. We dropped nuclear bombs on German nuclear facilities during D-Day.
It was unprecedented, and it worked. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy, but we're working with errors of margin that you acknowledge would most likely mean to nuclear weapons being dropped on large amounts of civilians. And just because something is crazy, and we know of another example of something being crazy, doesn't mean it'll work. For example, if I said, you know what I think we should do? I think we should do an invasion of China, ground invasion, D-Day style, right into Beijing. Just take the capital, and then all the Uyghurs will break out. We'll send them AKs, and they'll break out of the prisons. And then I say, it might sound crazy, but remember D-Day? Like, that isn't like a justification for me. That doesn't tell me that it would work just because it's also crazy. It might just be batshit crazy and stupid. There's been a lot of dumb military operations in the past.
If I've laid out my case in North Korea,
exactly. And I think it is about...
Talking about errors, you were asking back there, Dylan, about, well, how do you know if you get Kim or whatnot? I want to say, just for the record here, you ideally aim to decapitate the leadership, but let's say, worst case scenario, Kim survives. we've gotten most of his nuclear assets off. You know, they're done on the first
Possibly.
strike. Some will get through still, and even if Kim is dead, they're depending on how their chain works and their contingencies. Though, let's keep it real, those contingencies are pretty weak to ward off a coup. They keep the power pretty close to Kim. The thing is, if Kim's dead, then and they are able to transfer the orders to the next in kin, to his sister or whatever, and she survives, then okay, now they have a far smaller arsenal to work with. They launch whatever the hell they're getting off the ground. It might even be 0. It could be 10, could be 15, depending on how it goes. You shoot down some of those. Some of them get through. Let's say you sustain 7 hits. They get a couple bases in Japan. They get some targeted against Alaska. 1 hits, let's say Edward Air Force Base or something. Big loss, huge loss, right? Compare that to, oh, there's a 1% chance that they do a big nuclear war, even if it's just 1% that they start a nuclear war on their terms, when they have 1,500 thermonuclear weapons. And even if you shoot down most of them, you're still losing all of your cities, all those same casualties in Japan, all those same casualties in South Korea. In other words, the difference here isn't the death toll in the South. The difference is the death toll over here. The death toll in the South is a given.
So I do want to bring up, I never got this. It's in my notes. I never acknowledged this. I cross it out when I acknowledge something. 1 second. No, I missed that one. But anyway, here's something. You said earlier, and I do want to respond to your question, but I just want to get this because we don't have much time left, that when it came to, you know, the inevitability of basically some of these stuff getting through or us messing up, because you said this is an operation, you know, there's been tried. There will be some errors, there will be some mistakes. This always happens. I mean, during some of our most grandest operations like D-Day, a lot of our paratroopers miss cities. That happens. And you said we'll deal with it when it comes to it. When you say that, when an acknowledgement of errors when it comes to nuclear war, deal with it when it comes to it. When stuff goes as fast as you said it goes, could mean we deal with it when it comes to it, too late, city wiped off the face of the planet. And again, that is what it means. If we make an error here, that could mean millions of dead. This is the numbers we're playing with here, Kevin. And,
yeah, but we're the attackers. I was making the point about the errors. There will still probably be errors, but the errors are more on the side of the receiving end, not the initiator. Nuclear war favors the attacker.
This is also a horribly decrepit dictatorship that probably would also have errors in any type of response they would do.
That's good.
But those errors could mean we missed the base, we hit a city. We missed this, we hit this. We hit these civilians instead. This cluster munitions that we thought were going to on artillery to this naval base actually just hit a fucking orphanage or a wedding. I mean, we know a little bit about hitting weddings and military strikes, so that definitely does happen. Mistakes where we end up killing civilians, and we are one of the most sophisticated militaries in the world with some of the most funding and smartest people in the world, and we make mistakes. And we're talking about a government that is extremely decrepit dictatorship, and they're going to make mistakes sometimes even worse than ours. And
exactly, why do you trust them with 1,500, 1,800 nukes, which is what they're going to?
Because even if their chain of command would make mistakes as being a decrepit dictatorship, they still make the cost benefit analysis. They still know that if they were to engage in a nuclear war across the peninsula, if they were to engage into a conventional war against the peninsula, that the conventional power against the South Koreans are not comparable. They get fucking wiped off the planet when it comes to that. And when it comes to the nuclear power being added to that, nuclear weapons would wipe them off the face of the earth. There's a reason why these other nations that have gotten rid of their nukes or haven't used their nukes, and there's a reason why we were the only ones that have used nuclear weapons, is because when we did, no one else had the nukes, and they weren't as destructive as they are today. And they would have to, what you're telling me is that they would think in their minds, we're going to march our army down south, and after blazing it with nuclear weapons as the grand gambit to the world stage.
Won't use nukes on the South, ideally. If they start the war, the nukes are to blackmail America to let them take the South, right? That's what they're planning to do with them. They're not planning to just, nuke Washington. They might do it in a bit of rage, but I don't trust them.
So you think that the North Korean government could beat the South Koreans in a conventional war at this moment in time, or in the future?
Hours.
In
yeah,
24
because
hours.
The South Koreans find out that America is just throwing the 30,000 troops that they have stationed there to the wolves to become PLWs are dead. The second they find out that America doesn't have their back,
But that's
I agree
never
with you. They
gonna
have a more-
happen.
I agree
That
with
is
you. They have a more
impossible.
technologically advanced military. You're right. They spend a lot more. However, what the North lacks in spending and tech, they make up with in political will. The South has none to fight that war, to bear that morale loss of not having America have their back. They would surrender very quickly. And then America's cucked. American security guarantees mean nothing. Now the forces of darkness control Eurasia. Yeah, this affects
Wow.
Europe. This affects
Fucking
everywhere.
Darth Vader's gonna
So-
take over. Yeah.
The
Now,
So-
look,
forces.
Look,
all
when
right.
the
Go
forces
ahead,
of
Dylan. Yeah.
darkness is gonna take over. Fucking Skeletor and Darth Vader are gonna smite America, and it's all over, and it's fucking done because all of our military leadership would never use a nuclear weapon. I mean, we know that if this was to occur, we would be with the South Koreans. The Obama administration would have been with the South Koreans. The Bush administration before it would have been with the South Koreans. Bill Clinton would have been with the South Koreans. Trump would have been with the South Koreans even. And Trump is one of the most dumb fuck presidents that has ever existed in this country. Joe
didn't have
Biden would be with the South
1,500
Koreans.
nukes then.
All of them, even if they have full ability to smite America on the world stage, we would do it. We knew
Oh.
during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Kennedys knew. Joseph Kennedy knew that Soviet Union had nukes ready to launch them at the United States, but yet was ready and was proposing invasions of Cuba, was ready to do a nuclear strike if aggressed upon. They were ready to wipe out billions possibly across the planet. And you're telling me we're not willing to take out the North Koreans? We're not willing to take them out in this type of scenario?
But the North Koreans aren't going to start that war until they've got enough nukes to deter America. They don't yet. 60 is not enough. When they have 1,500 to 1,800 H bombs, then America's not going to get involved. Even the most hawkish, bar Curtis LeMay or Douglas MacArthur, the most hawkish leaders that could become president, even somebody like John Bolton.
So you
looks
think
at
of
that
John
as we
Bolton
are
was-
not-
Wait,
we are not
let Kevin finish it.
Okay.
not losing Washington to save Seoul. You guys are on your own. And then the North wins. Even if the South can win, technically speaking, you're right, they could in a 1v1. They don't have the will to fight that war after that morale defeat, and they will surrender. And especially with leadership like this, Moon Jae-in views the comrades in the North as preserving Korean culture. And aren't they so great? Let's do sunshine policy, bro. They would surrender like that, man. They would surrender so fast, and then America would go from being a superpower to a lonely, irrelevant country on a group of a couple of relevant continents, and the forces of fascism and communism would control Eurasia because NATO would fall apart in the aftermath of that. This is about the vanguard of the
Do you
liberal.
care about that, Kevin? Fascism taking over?
Yeah, I talk about it a lot on my
Aren't you
program.
an AIU viewer who thinks that Antifa and Black Lives Matter are terror organizations? Aren't you, as a foreign policy person, should know the legitimacy of threat that goes? So if you're somebody who cares about fascism, wouldn't you be a little bit more concerned about making statements like that?
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Have you seen what's unfolded? Look, I know that this isn't relevant here, and
Yeah,
I
this
know
isn't
that
really relevant, Dylan.
Well, no, what I'm saying is I
red
don't
herring.
think you
This
can
is a
talk
nice
about
red
battling
herring, Mr.
fascism.
Burns. I just want to
This
say,
isn't a-
nice
no,
red
I'm
herring.
just
Mr.
making the
Burns.
point. I don't think
This
you
tried
care.
the same thing. This
I don't
is from
think you
Liz's
care.
playbook. Come
What do you
on,
mean,
man.
Liz's
I thought
playbook?
you were better
Look.
than that.
What do you mean better than that? Look, if I hear somebody who with any foreign policy knowledge or thinks they have foreign policy knowledge saying that Black Lives Matter should be considered a terrorist organization, then I know they have no respect for foreign policy whatsoever and shouldn't be ever considered somebody who knows anything about foreign policy. That's why I had to bring it up at some point. Definitely when you talk about combating fascism, yeah, you want to use the same tactics as the
Dylan.
Russian government. Didn't you talk about arresting fifth columnists recently? And how we should kind of go back to the old Cold War ways of throwing these people
We're in the
jail?
Cold War. The Cold War never ended. The
Yeah,
only
so
difference
throw
is
these
that we-
dirty
Just to be
communists in
clear,
prison. Oh,
wait,
yeah,
wait,
we're
wait,
defending
wait,
democracy.
Dylan, I get, like, I can't vouch for anything that Kevin has said here, but that doesn't really seem to be relevant to, like, what we're
It's
talking
not
about,
relevant.
right?
It's a red herring to try to.
No, it is relevant, and let me tell you exactly why it's relevant.
Why is it
Basquiat.
relevant?
It's relevant because if somebody's talking about, I need to take millions and basically guarantee their death through the strike, but I'm saving more lives at the end of the day. I'm not
Right.
doing. The Koreans, they would disagree with me, and I'm making a decision to kill
Right.
millions of people without their and
Right.
not telling them, and I'm doing it to defend freedom.
Right.
At the same time, while he scorns democratic institutions and wants to throw them out of the window, I find it laughable.
But democratic institutions. Antifa?
Wait,
Antifa?
Black Lives
Doesn't
Matter.
affect
Do you
you.
believe Black Lives Matter is a terror organization?
The founders of it admitted, one, to being a trained Marxist. Two,
So,
the tactics
who
that
cares?
they the tactics that they have perpetrated
Wow.
amount to in
I feel like
terrorism.
I feel like this is kind of a stretch.
It's not relevant.
Like I guess it feels like a stretch because I guess I feel like you could be against a fascist
Bastian,
regime overseas and still be like a really.
Well, Bastia, let me tell you this. I need to defend democracy by taking on the Iranians.
Right.
And by you saying you support Bernie, or you do this, or you do that, I think you should be thrown in a fucking prison cell. And then you're like, wait, but you just said you
When did
to
I
defend
say
democracy.
that?
I'm not saying you said that. I'm trying to make a broader point.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
not saying you said that.
Bro.
All right,
I'm
so
making a
your
broader
point
I'm not- I
is
didn't say-
in
Kevin
short.
Cassidy, you don't know what that word means, Kevin.
Wait, just to be clear, your point is that Kevin's not really committed to freedom and
Exactly.
okay.
He's not. So that's why I it's even a bigger
Literally, you're willing to use nukes in the defense of liberty. You're not. You're willing
while throwing people in prison for having democratically protected political positions, and you call the organizations that oppose you terrorists, like Black Lives Matter.
Well, it's a democratically protected political position to loot the AutoZone and burn it to the ground. Is that correct?
So they're a terror. Wait, Black Lives Matter. When did they say, "Hey, go loot your AutoZone, go burn this"? When did the organization Black Lives Matter do that? When was that? I thought. So when did that happen? When did they say?
Dude,
you know,
this
pick
is
up
not
an
relevant,
AJ?
but we can get into it. But it's
Look,
not relevant.
I guess I would say I'm trying to think. I get what you're saying, Dylan. It just feels like I don't know. If you accept his his position that he
Look,
I don't know.
it's simple.
It just
It's
feels like
simple.
it's another
I just find
subject.
It is kind of another subject.
Like,
but
he
also
did
went
make
to
it-
other areas. He went into other areas as well. He went to other areas. He said, this is kind of off topic, but I'll talk about this. So I did one as well.
All
And I
right.
was just making a broader point on how he disregarded the Korean democracy and their
Yeah.
view on it. And he's willing
Right,
to go
and
away
that
other...
I think that is a more solid point. Where Kevin is willing to say, and I guess we're going a little longer here because this maybe is a point. If you wanted to actually question his commitment to liberty and democracy and all that, Kevin, you were basically willing to write off South Korea. It's just it's
well, that's a better point.
right.
That's a
And
better
now,
point.
how can you say I stand for liberty, I stand for the expansion of all these values, and then say basically South Korea, which is if we were trying to construct a showpiece for the success of liberal democracy and capitalism, it would look like South Korea, right? How can you then say, well, in defense of these values, look, if South Korea is wiped out in the conflict, it's acceptable losses, and we really don't need to consult them either.
Because, well, first to kind of get to that point, you look into, for example, Jean Kirkpatrick doctrine, that kind of stuff. I also would have worked with Pinochet. I don't like Pinochet. Pinochet killed a lot of innocent people, but I would.
That's a very different issue, though. That's a very different issue, and this isn't working with. This is refusing to consult, right?
Okay, fair enough. Because I want to make it very clear because, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers will recognize this. Obviously, a lot of my viewers recognize this. Dylan Burns, it doesn't appear necessarily recognizes this yet. The arsenal that they are amassing, well, not currently poses a completely existential threat to America. The trajectory they're on and the trajectory that Mr. Burns here is proposing of continuing with the negotiations that they know that they're playing us and taking the cleaners on, the trajectory is they will have the means to wipe out all of America forever. And if you asked me to choose between picking South Korea, which was doomed from the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, versus picking America, look, this is about saving ourselves in North America at this point. And it sucks. Look, if it was me, I would have taken out North Korea before they ever got a single 2-kiloton atomic bomb. But I wasn't in charge. And you know what? I like Bush. But Bush screwed this one up, and to Bolton, too. I like Bolton. I don't agree with him on everything. So they bungled this. Now, they did good work in Iraq, good work in Afghanistan, liberated 50 million people. But, to answer the question about doesn't this undermine your commitment to democracy, it's kind of like saying, if you've got 5,000 people that are about to, face existential threat, that they are about to be completely imperiled, and you can take out that threat to them, the guys that you're going to have to kill, they got 4 hostages, man. And if you do anything, those hostages are going to die. I would kill the hostages. And you say, oh, you don't care about human life. No, I just saved like a net, almost 5,000 people. So yeah, I care about human life. I care about democracy. We lose America. There's no more democracy because the vanguard of liberty is gone and the world splinters and is divided and conquered by the forces of fascism and communism. So you can't save anybody else if you're not secure. So
I will say this. I think we've gone. Dylan, is there anything you want to push back on in that before you do a closing statement?
I disagree with all of it, but I'll just say that there's a difference between working with people and acknowledging that, hey, in this scenario, you will lose vast amount of your population. Well, are you willing to take that risk?
Yeah.
And maybe making a plan with them and saying, I don't even need to talk to you. This will kill millions of people, possibly. Oh, and also the North Koreans, who you also consider to be your people. But I don't need to consult you because Big Daddy America, that's what matters in my book, because I'm the big defender of Freedom Boy. That I just disagree with fundamentally.
Okay. So with that, I think, let's see, we started with Kevin speaking first and then Dylan. Let's see. Kevin, would you like to, I guess, start us off with the closing statements?
Sure.
Let's do, how about, again, 5 minutes apiece.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, yeah, no, again, thanks for, organizing this and everything. And thanks to Bastia for moderating this. I think, it was an interesting discussion. Things got a little bit personal and everything, but that can happen during debates, right? So I think, the viewers, they got to see two different sides here. I think, I fairly clearly kind of made my case, but if you'd like to learn more about how I view their end game playing out and why I view it as inevitable, I've got a two-part series on my channel, Superpower Broadcasting, called North Korea's Endgame. You can go and check it out, and I make the point very clearly there. Look, there's going to be a war at some point. It's either going to be on their terms, they take the South, or it's on our terms and we nip it in the bud. Either way, people are going to die in the South. That's very clear. Ethical points were raised here. Moral points were raised here. At the end of the day, I think it's very clear, given the role of America, given the absolute duty of those in charge here to protect their own citizens first and foremost, that if you and your cities are vaporized and irradiated and whatnot, you're not going to be able to do much liberation of Venezuela or Iraq or wherever. So America's the foundation, the bedrock. And unfortunately, we've gotten to a point, from George W. Bush trusting the negotiation process to Barack Obama literally calling his process, his doctrine, strategic patience, or as I call it, strategic procrastination, just passing the buck along to Donald Trump, as Dylan mentioned, writing beautiful love letters to Comrade Kim. We've bungled this, and we've gotten to a point where South Korea, there will be survivors there. That country has been doomed for a long time. We've done 30 years of negotiations that have gone nowhere. North Korea knows what they're doing. They will never make the same mistake as Gaddafi. Kim Jong-il watched Ceausescu get murdered or executed by those who rose up against him, and he vowed never here. He watched as Saddam was taken out. He watched as Gaddafi traded away, his arsenal and everything. And he said, we're never making that mistake. Look at what the Americans do. And you know what? I'm glad that they're scared of America. I'm not one of those guys who says, look, Kim feels scared. He needs his nukes. I understand why he feels he needs the nukes. I'm not on his side. I want him to be scared. He's got reason to be scared. He's an enemy of freedom. He's an enemy of human rights. It's an absolute disaster. And if we don't do anything and we accept and put up with them as a status quo for, as they say, the 10 million year reign, hundreds of millions of people will be killed by their brutality just in the next 1,000 years. I'm not willing to accept it. And we all know, implicit in that, there's a 1 to 5, maybe even 10% chance that each given century they initiate attack out of rage. And we don't want all of our kids, yourselves, your family, your grandkids, they go to school and they know that North Korea and their insane leader has the means to put a hydrogen bomb on your school, on your house, on your workplace, out of their insane, deluded, moronic ideology, whatever convictions they have, whatever paranoia they have, because it's not just Kim Jong-un, it's anyone that succeeds him in that leadership. And there will, and I'm surprised we didn't get into covert sort of ops and stuff, but there will never be a domestic revolution within that country. It's impossible. And the longer it goes on, the more they're consolidated. And with that, I would say it's very clear here that we are at the option of last resort. Everybody says nukes are last resort. We're at the option of last resort. I think I've made my case. So we'll let Mr. Burns then finish it. So.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. And folks, I just dropped a link to Kevin's channel in the chat. So if you want to check him out, that's where you can find him. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Bastien.
All right, Dylan, you got 5 minutes.
Well, I will say, first want to thank Kevin Cassidy for dropping the $100 per hour debate requirement originally. I mean, obviously, maybe it was his value increase and he just knew I could never make it. And so that's why the debate requirement was thrown away. Maybe it was the confidence boost after debating Liz, somebody who knows very little about foreign policy, that made him like get enough confidence to say, I don't need to charge Dylan $100 for an hour. Who knows what it was, but I'm happy that I had the talk. I went in on the democracy thing when it came to BLM and Antifa. I do think it was directly tied to the foundational beliefs that Kevin hold, but I'll also say I know that most likely, considering the $100 debate requirement, how long this came to scheduled, that another talk with Kevin was probably not going to happen. So I wanted to bring it up at some point if I found a way to connect it. Thought I found a decent way to connect it. And look, Kevin made a very elegant ending, and I think I've already made my kind of piece on this perfectly clear. This is something that is rejected by the wide swaths of the foreign policy community. This is something that is rejected by people as far right and as real as John Bolton. Now, I'm somebody who I do believe realism can be used in productive manners. I mean, I just launched an all-out offensive on Kevin, so obviously I believe in some amount of realism. But I do think that this position of nuking North Korea should be acknowledged as an extremely radical one that thankfully is not really respected in the foreign policy community. And I'm going to end it with a prepared message that I brought together that I think really shows what the future of our foreign policy should be here. And it's everybody's talking about bagism, shagism, dragism, madism, ragism, tagism, thisism, thatism, ism. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Anyway, that'll be my ending statement. Love you all. Have a blessed day.
Wow. All right. Well, powerful words. Dylan, thank you very much. And folks, I dropped Dylan's link in the chat as well if you want to check out his channel. Dylan, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. Hey, maybe we can do this again sometime. I hope you all had fun, and thank you so much.
Thanks for watching.
Anyway, see y'all later.
Have a good night. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, what did you all think of that? That was really something. Not what I expected. Didn't think it would go down like that. But yeah, what did you think? Let's get some music down. Yeah, that was really something different. I did not expect that. Let's get some music going. I think Need More You, preferably in focus. Yeah, I don't know what was going on with that out of focus, but okay. So yeah, I'm curious what you folks think of that. That was Kevin Castley from Superpower Broadcasting, and Dylan Burns from here on Twitch. So I guess should I disclose my position here? I'm not going to lie, he didn't nuke pill me, but I do not think Korean unification is possible. That's fair. Stakes were spicier than any of Destiny's. I would say that was true as well. I guess I would say this. I tried to ask questions to kind of get this issue out because it didn't seem to be coming up. I don't accept Kevin's premise that nuclear war is inevitable. Or that war with North Korea is inevitable, purely because war was not inevitable with the Soviet Union. So I don't see how a war with North Korea would be inevitable if war with a much more powerful country, was averted. So I'm skeptical of that claim, and I think that he just way too casually writes off the risk of civilian casualties. Which are acknowledged, right? I didn't want to get too far into specifics because I didn't want to get too biased, but for example, I don't know how we could avoid civilian casualties with China or with Japan given fallout, That said, I was surprised at Dylan's arguments against him. It seemed like Dylan's arguments were focused, I guess, more on the difficulty of an effective strike. And I also felt like, I don't know, sometimes Dylan was pretty quick to, like, kind of meme and joke about it, but I don't know, it didn't seem like his arguments against Kevin were too direct. So while I agree with Dylan's points, and I thought he made some of them pretty well, I guess on the whole, I thought Kevin made more rhetorically appealing arguments until he said basically, yeah, we just write off the population because at the end of the day, they're doomed. That was just too much any way you slice it. So, long story short, I thought Kevin's position was untenable from the start, and only became more untenable when he was saying basically, look, South Korea is doomed any way you slice it. I don't think that's the case, any more than, say, West Berlin was doomed during the Cold War. It's just not the case. So I don't, and I don't think he ever demonstrated why it was inevitable. I think, I just don't think he made that point very clear. That being said, I guess Dylan pushed back on him in ways I didn't really understand. So there's a lot of focus on relatively minor specifics. And at the end, the Black Lives Matter bit felt like a bit of a distraction. I understand why he brought it up, because he's trying to question his commitment to all this liberty stuff. But it seems like again, I try not to be too biased here, but I wanted him to acknowledge, I wanted to take the core of Dylan's point and have Kevin get to that. And that was why I brought up South Korea again, because I don't understand how you can be liberty, 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 and yet, here's this great free country, South Korea, that we just goes up in smoke. That's just the way it had to happen. I don't think so. So, I guess that's my opinion. I disagree with what Kevin said, but I wouldn't have taken Dylan's approach. So, what do y'all think? I saw RDF in here cheering on Kevin. That was it was a lonely battle in the chat for you. So I appreciate you being here to show a little even-handedness here. But RDF, I guess, do you agree with the claim that, look, that those civilian casualties are acceptable? Labyrinth says, I think the point he was trying to make was that at some point North Korea would have so many weapons, the U.S. would make a cost-benefit analysis not to intervene directly if North Korea attacked South Korea. Okay, so as for that point, I would be, Spooky Nukies, yes, I remember that. At that point, again, something I didn't want to hammer home too hard was 1,800 nuclear weapons. I mean, could North Korea even support 1,800 nuclear weapons? I mean, they're not free. They're expensive to maintain and keep. I mean, would that even be possible? I don't know. Nwajuk says, using nuclear weapons is an indefensible position in my honest opinion. I don't think so. I think you could use them sometimes. I just, I don't think that was a situation where I would. Let me be right back. I'll just I've got to let this cat out real quick. Hey, buddy, come on. Okay. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Okay, yeah, so it seems like sustaining that many nuclear weapons would be difficult. Emerald RA says slave labor is pretty cheap. True, although again, nuclear weapons, I guess, are a little more complex than I think would, you could do just with forced labor. Okay. Any other thoughts in here? Ian Stevens 2020. I believe you are the famous Ian Stevens from Twitter. Are you not? Good to have you. Are you saying that you didn't enjoy that? Let's see. State of Sam says, how do you sustain nukes? Well, like the uranium, plutonium cores and nuclear weapons, I think, degrade over time and have to be replaced. In essence, nuclear weapons have a shelf life of some kind. And they do require maintenance, and the cores, I believe, need to be replaced. I don't know how long it takes, but they do require some form of maintenance there. Let's see. Bastiat, assume all these positions assume North Korea isn't capable of making cost benefits analyses themselves. They're not entirely irrational. Yes, and I do like that Dylan brought that up. I thought that was a good point to bring up. That North Korea doesn't have a suicidal death wish, right? They do want to live, and in that sense, there's some deterrent value, right? Okay. Dr. Pepper says Trump is still your president. Yes, for about 2.5 more months. Richie Booth says this 4 people to save thousands point becomes moot when it's actually close to 80 million people. Indirect fire, let alone those affect on a wider basis. Well, I guess it depends on how much the cost benefit you think. Yeah, Jimmy Rustler. Nobody brought up nuclear fallout. It's true. Law of Science says I feel like Dylan got baited too easily. Arguments alone, Dylan did well rhetorically, but he broke down after the bait. Well, fair enough. What did you think was the bait? Let's see. RDF says, I don't agree that South Korea is doomed. I believe the more we wait for the DPRK, North Korea that is, to get access to more nuclear weapons would create the potential for a doomed South Korea. Okay. Bossy, do you think that Biden will go back to his original plan? No, I don't think so. Bossy, rational actors do not exist. Everyone wants to avoid being wiped off the earth. I think that's a fair statement. Okay. M60 says, bring the troops home. Maybe someday. Lucas Grios, thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that. Or rather, gifting a subscription to JSoft. Thank you so much for that. And by the way, real quick, I'd like to thank some other subscribers here. Brian the Science Guy, thank you for subscribing, as well as Alexander the Grape. Very cool. Very epic. Status Sam, thank you again, of course, for subscribing. Very cool. And of course, motherfucking ass Goblin, not sure if you're still in here, but thank you for subscribing. And Manly Hun, hey, thank you too. I appreciated that. Very cool. Alright, Bossy, it all aimed at Seoul, indeed. Zartrek says, weapons maintenance is mostly about tritium for H-bombs. The DPRK does not have enough nuclear industrial infrastructure to make or maintain weapons using tritium, but can make weaker pure fission weapons. Yeah, I think what was interesting, it came up during the discussion, was talking about, they were talking about boosted fission devices, and I believe boosted fission devices are a stage of nuclear weapons development between just a basic fission bomb, like Hiroshima, Nagasaki bomb, and a pure hydrogen weapon. I believe boosted fission is, let me check this out, boosted fission. Yeah, it uses a small amount of fusion fuel to increase the rate and thus yield of a fission reactor. So it's a little bigger. Okay. Thank you, Status Sam, by the way, for gifting a subscription to Nero Wheel. I appreciate that. Classical Neolib says predictions for 2022 and 2024. I don't think I could give you any yet. Yeah, but thanks for being here, buddy. Okay, man. Yeah, that was real. That was quite a discussion, quite a debate, a real clash of the Twitter titans, as it were. Bossy, I think Kevin's argument was valid but not proven sound. If you accept war is inevitable, then interfering as soon as possible will only save lives. He should have bitten the bullet and clarified that. That whole debate should have been focused around the inevitability of the war being true or false, in my opinion. I think that's a fair point. I tried to get to that. If you acknowledge it as inevitable, then Kevin's point makes sense. I just don't know how you could ever really conclude that it's inevitable, given that we've had long Cold Wars that resulted in peace, So I don't, or at least, less than the use of nuclear weapons. Internet says, Bassett, when we're serving the U.S. together as freshman legislators, can we eat lunch together? Yes, we can. But, I still don't think I'm going to ban you from the Discord, All right. But it's good to have you here, Endernax. I appreciate that. Sarix Rogue says, Bassett, a lot bigger than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Very true. Quite true. Say Sam, get some dignity. Donating lots of money for attention is... What do you mean? Are you serious, Curious Kitty Cat? That is probably the most based and epic thing you can do, okay? That is a man who appreciates another man's time, and I really appreciate that. So, hey, don't let anybody shame you for that. Okay, All right. Yeah, Sam is indeed based and cool-pilled. Bossy, are you going to apply to be the host of Jeopardy? I think that would be fun, but I think there are probably other people waiting in line. It is very sad, though, to hear what happened to... very sad to hear what happened to Alex Trebek. Just a, not only a kind of an icon of American culture, really, I guess, global culture, but, just a classy guy. The way he handled cancer, I don't know, very brave, it seemed like. And he was very open about it, and I don't know, I thought that was really cool. So, very cool. Bossy, did you really support Trump in 2016? I supported Trump briefly in 2015, until I, realized, holy moly, this guy might become president. And then suddenly it got a lot more scary and a lot more real. Stay saying, thank you for gifting a tier 1 subscription to Curious Kit Kat. Very cool. I appreciate that. Sean Connery, best of Trebek. When the troll gets real, amen. Bassett, could you say you could justify the use of nuclear weapons? What conflict do you see the most likely for them to be used? And do you think a first strike scenario is justifiable? Yes, I would see certain first strike scenarios as justifiable. For example, if the Soviets had invaded Western Europe during the height of the Cold War, we just wouldn't have had the conventional weapons to push them back. So I would at least consider the use of some kind of tactical device before I just abandoned all of Europe to the Soviet military, as one example, right? But the key value, though, of nuclear weapons is, deterrence, at least in my mind. You don't want to use them because using them really dials things up to 11, right? RDF, thank you for subscribing at Tier 2, my friend. I appreciate that. Good to have you here. Chameleon Eyes says, Bossy, what was the most foundational book you read that informs your thinking about foreign policy today? Gosh, that's tough. I don't know. I don't know that I have a single book, but I will say, actually, I will say there is a good book. Let me pull it out here. Actually, a good pair of books. And they're real simple reads. These are two books by Robert Kagan, foreign policy guy. Let me see if I can find his background here. Robert Kagan, Senior Associate at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, monthly columnist in the Washington Post, at least at the time. This is a book called Of Paradise and Power, America and Europe in the New World Order. Basically explaining why the United States has a more militaristic approach to its foreign policy. And then this book, his follow-up, The Return of History and the End of Dreams, where he makes the case that basically Russia and China are back, and the real long-term challenge is dealing with them. And that this whole terrorism thing, important, but fundamentally the real challenge is dealing with the return of sort of great power politics. And so I think those are two really good books that I would check out. Another good one, Henry Kissinger wrote a book called, I think it's just called Diplomacy, where he talks about diplomacy, over the last few centuries. Most interesting is he talks about a fellow by the name of Gustav Stresemann during the Weimar Republic, who, using diplomacy, tried to achieve many of the things that later on Hitler achieved through threats of force. In essence, Stresemann's goal was to change the Weimar settlement, the Versailles settlement after World War I. And purely through diplomatic maneuvering, he comes close to achieving some of these goals. Hitler takes over and history takes a different path, but for a time, the Weimar Republic offered a chance for something different, a sort of peaceful diplomatic reorientation of Germany's position after World War I that maybe, would have eventually led to more lasting peace if it had been allowed to go on. So, a lot of interesting stories in Henry Kissinger's book, Diplomacy. So that was a good book, too. Boss, did you hear the rumors about Putin stepping down? I think that would be delightful, but we'll see. Richie Boot says, one plan for Soviet invasion of Eastern Europe was buried nukes so they would have to bury the chickens to keep the electronics from dying. Whoa, that's crazy. Never heard about that one, but hey, the Russians were very clever. Same Prince says, what debate is going down? I apologize, the debate just ended. Post-nuclear debate night. Okay. RDF says, thanks for the book recommend. You should read Neoconservative, A Neoconservatism, Why We Need It, by Douglas Murray and Bernard Henry Levy's The Empire and the Five Kings, America's Abdication, and the Fate of the World. Great pro-interventionist books. Well, hey, folks, check them out. Badass Simmer says, Basiat, Weimar, can you really articulate? Well, I think that's what it was called, the Weimar Republic. That is to say, that was the regime in Germany between World War I and World War II, or rather, between World War I and the rise of the Nazis. Okay, and then another point here. Let's see. Phantom Lord XYZ says, what are your thoughts on the lefty part of the Democratic Party? Should we ally with them, or should we try to fight them in elections? Ally with them when necessary, and fight them in elections, I guess, where possible, right? But, I guess, compete with them when we can, and I guess work with them when we must, right? Since ultimately neither of us wants the Republicans in power. My man, 10,407 says, Bassett, has your beard always been so full and aesthetic, or did it take time to become like that? Do I still have hope? My man, how old are you, if you don't mind my asking? It's important for my answer here. Let's see here. Jimmy Rustler says, Kevin apparently didn't care that we'd essentially have military bases getting vaporized. Yeah, we'd lose Japan and Edwards Air Force Base. Like, what was that about? Yeah. Alright, my man is 25. Let me tell you this. When I was 25, my beard was still kind of patchy. As you can see, the connections here are still not as strong as I'd like them to be. Sorry, it just went blurry right as I was about to start showing off the beard. I really got to fix this camera. Come on, refocus. Alright. Well, I'll wait here. Among Us stream when? We did an Among Us stream on Election Day. It was actually pretty fun. Alright, here you go. So you can see here, the connection here isn't the strongest, but it only really came in good, I guess, when I was 30. Then the beard was pretty solid. But I do trim it every other day. It's important to do, because otherwise it looks crazy. But yeah, that's what I'd say, is it took me a little later in life for the beard to come in without any of that patchiness. So you still got hope. Okay, you should read A Neoconservative Persuasion by Irving Kristol and World Order by Henry Kissinger. I have to check them out. Ozzy, why do you pretend like after North Korea gets nuked, they're not going to nuke Tokyo? Yeah, I think if I were guessing what Kevin's position was, acceptable losses. Ozzy, you should be very good at Among Us considering your job. Well, I did win my first 2 rounds of Among Us ever, so I'm pretty proud of that. Okay. So that was fun. That was a fun one. All right. Let's see. Basket of Paradise and Power. Let's see here. I consider this one of those seminal treatises about which any discussion of European-American relations would be incomplete and which will shape that discussion for years to come, said Dr. Henry Kissinger. I think I see where you get your moderate sensibilities. Well, thank you for that. Yeah. I think, look, of course, Henry Kissinger is widely regarded as a war criminal for his activities in the Vietnam War. So, take any discussion of Henry Kissinger with a grain of salt, right? But I love what you do here. I'm a 3L and would love to chat with you about the current state of legal education. If you're willing, I have lots of thoughts. Hey, maybe one of these days we'll do that. That could be fun. A lot of people ask about law school, and admittedly, I'm a few years apart from it, so I'm not sure what it's like now. Phantom Lord XYZ says, what is the best way to compete with China on the world stage? Well, I suppose there'd be 3 parts to that. 1, maintain our military strength. 2, maintain and build our security guarantees with our allies in East Asia and around the world. And 3, perhaps most importantly, we've got to continue on trying to be the best America we can be, because our greatest power is the force of our example. When we are not an example to the other countries of the world, when we do not inspire confidence as a leading nation in the world, when we cannot handle a disease outbreak, when our economy is unbalanced and doesn't feel like it provides opportunity to people around the country, when our democracy does not inspire confidence among our own population, we are not well equipped to stand up to China. We've got to live our values just as we did in the Cold War. When we tried to make improvements on some of our failures domestically, in part to address the fact that Soviet propaganda was so effective at highlighting those deficiencies. Nobody, I think, probably few people watched the divisiveness of the 1960s in the United States with the kind of glee that the Soviets did, because it proved to be such effective and useful propaganda for them, right? So yeah, we've got to, and the Chinese are doing the same thing now. So we've got to really live our values and be our best selves if we are going to compete with China. Okay, do you think any other primary candidate would have beaten Trump in the general? No, I do not. I mean, with how close this one was, no, I don't think so. By far, says, Basket, what's your opinion on a not insignificant portion of the Republican Party supporting Trump's voter fraud rhetoric, Democrats in the election? Look, there is, for a variety of reasons, which are perhaps too complex to get into here tonight, I guess 1/3 of this country would follow President Trump literally anywhere and everywhere, and I gotta say, it's kind of disturbing. But hey, that's an issue for another night, because that's an issue a lot that we'll need to do a lot of reckoning with as a country. Bosnian, how you destroy the GOP virus once and for all? Look, I don't think you can destroy one of our nation's two political parties. It's got to be reformed from the inside out. Okay, so with that, ladies and gentlemen, I've got to tie things up for tonight, and I've also got to figure out what's going on with my camera here. But this was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of good discussion, a lot of good stuff. So if you haven't already, give us a follow on twitter.com. I sure would appreciate that, ladies and gentlemen. That's definitely important stuff. Your follows help us expand the community, do more fun things like we did tonight, and generally speaking, have a good time. So I appreciate that. Beyond that, if you haven't already, check out our Discord. You really won't regret it. It's a great community. It's a lot of fun. It's where we hang out in between streams. So check it out. I think you'll like that. And of course, if you missed tonight's debate, it'll be up on our YouTube channel. There's a link enclosed, so please do check that out. Eli staying alive since Bassi. Good stuff, man. First time at your stream, and it won't be my last. Thank you so much. Very cool. Bassi always likes your tweets when you add him. It's a good deal. That's true, Lucas Reeves. I do like to spread the dopamine around. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. We've got to spend some time doing this voter fraud stuff, because clearly these claims ain't going away. So we'll have to do a deep dive into some of that one of these days. We got to get some more good guests going, and I think tonight was a lot of fun. I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, recently I've been thinking, gosh, I don't know where I'm going with this stream. I don't know. Do I want to keep doing this for the long term? Tonight's stream was a lot of fun, though. I enjoyed it. And I'm feeling like, I'm feeling like we can finish this year strong and make 2021 the best year this channel's ever had. So I'm excited, and I hope you are too. Thank you to everybody who subscribed tonight. And hey, thanks for being here, because it was a lot of fun. So, oh my goodness, we enjoy you, man. As I said, you're awesome. Well, thanks for that, Lucas. That's so kind of you to say. Holy moly. All right. On that note, let's see. What is the name of this guy's channel? He changed it. What the hell did Nate change the name of his channel to now? I've got to look it up because it's some weird name. Okay, FTLBZ. Can you tell Nate when we get there to change it to something that you can recognize? Holy macaroni. Because he's got a great channel. Nate does great content, top tier stuff, and you will always enjoy his work. So hey, we're going to go visit Nate. I hope you stick around with me for that. And ladies and gentlemen, in the words of our next president, duly elected, God bless the United States of America, and may God protect our troops. We'll see you all real soon. Take care.